Chapter 1200. Among them, there was a deep wound on her waist that required 5 stitches. There was a wound on her ankle that required 4 stitches. There were bruises all over her body and her shoulder was dislocated. But now, she seemed to have gone crazy, as if she couldn't feel the pain in her body at all. Wuxia suddenly stopped her. "Don't move. Your wound has just been stitched up. Get lost. Don't touch me." She cut him off with a roar and pushed him away violently. She almost used all her strength. Wuxia lost his balance after being pushed by her and fell onto the wall. "How can you be so cruel as to take you as a hostage? You're so cruel. If you want to take her as a hostage, why don't you go? Why don't you go? Wuxia, how can you be so cruel? Why did I meet you? You bring me more danger, more harm, more nightmares. Why?" She blurted out the question unconsciously. Even Yun Shirshir was taken aback when she yelled this out. It seemed that those words were a little too much. Wuxia's face was still as calm as before. After a long silence, he helplessly tugged at his lips and looked down tiredly. Yun Shirshir also realized how hurtful her words were. But once the words were said, it was like spilled water that couldn't be taken back. She suddenly fell silent, lowered her head, and clutched the bedsheets tightly. Her tears dripped onto the white bedsheets, leaving faint traces. Self-reproach, guilt, worry, heartache, all of them came to her mind. She was overwhelmed with a myriad of emotions, like a tidal wave that wanted to engulf her. She didn't mean to hurt him with those words. But she couldn't understand. She really couldn't understand why he had to sacrifice the 2 children to protect her. The nurse had just entered the ward with 2 packets of medicine when she saw the blood seeping out of the bandage on her waist. She frowned. What happened? Why did the wound split open? She hurried forward, wanting to change her bandage. Just as she touched her, Yun Shirshir avoided her and didn't let her touch her. The nurse frowned. It was a little tricky. However, he heard Wuxia say, "Get out." "Chairman Mu?" The nurse looked shocked and explained, "The patient's wound has split open. I'll change it for her. Get out," he said coldly again. She naturally did not dare to object to his orders. She hurriedly put down the medicine in her hand and left. Wuxia sat back down on the bed and reached out to touch the gauze around her waist. Yun Shirshir dodged again, obviously unwilling to be touched by him. "Don't be willful," he looked up and said in a low voice. Yun Shirshir's eyes widened in shock. Just as she was about to speak, she heard him say in a deep voice, "If possible, even if I have to exchange my life for it, I will never let him take the risk." As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's eyes trembled, and her heart instantly collapsed. Wuxia looked up, his lips stiff and cold. He didn't agree to it at first. However, Yu stubbornly asked him to believe him. Fine, then he would believe him. He believed that his son could confidently promise him that he would bring Xiao Yichen back to his side safely. Then he would believe him. However, Yun Shirshir didn't know about his plan. She was still a little angry with him, and was a little resistant to his actions. Wuxia frowned and caressed her face gently. "Don't avoid me, okay? After I change your bandage, lie down quietly. I won't touch you." There was a hint of pleading in his words. Without a doubt, he was lowering himself to plead with her, putting down all his pride. Chapter 1201. Only then did Wuxia heave a sigh of relief. He untied the gauze and reapplied the ointment. His movements were extremely serious and gentle, and his technique was also very professional. A trace of cold touch came from the wound, and she couldn't help but shudder a little. "Does it hurt?" He looked up nervously. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and remained silent. Wuxia continued his actions. After he was done bandaging her wound, he stood up and turned around. She abruptly reached out and anxiously wrapped her arms around his waist. Wuxia's body froze as his expression froze. "Don't go," she was afraid, really afraid. "Wuxia, don't go. I didn't mean to hurt you." She choked on her sobs and her voice broke. She hugged him even tighter. "Don't go." Her helpless appearance was like a small boat drifting on the sea, bobbing up and down, panicking in the storm. Wuxia sat back on the bed and hugged her. His big palm gently stroked her trembling back and said in a deep voice, "They'll be fine. Don't be afraid. I won't let anything happen to them." Really? She was skeptical, but her face was still uneasy. Yes. Sure me you Xiaoyichen and you. 4 of us. Not one less. Muyaja hugged her tighter. Yin Sure pursed her lips and held back her tears and uneasiness. She hugged his waist and buried her face in his chest, but she could no longer suppress the fear in her heart. Her hot tears burned his skin in an instant. Muyaja's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead heavily. Don't be afraid. Suddenly, footsteps came from the door. Yin Sure was startled. She looked up and saw Muxing walking in with the help of a nurse. The old man suddenly aged a lot overnight. His white hair grew and the wrinkles on his face deepened. He walked into the ward, stopped by the bed, and looked at her. Previously, when he found out that he had always regarded the thief as his daughter, and that Mu Wanru was not Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood, Yin Sure, whom he had always hated, was actually Mu Qingqing's real daughter. Mu Sheng was stunned for a long time when he learned the truth. He still could not accept it. In that case, Yin Sure, whom he had always regarded as an invader and an unclean woman, was the child he had been searching for more than 10 years. And Mu Wanru was just an impostor who stole her identity. This fact was too much of a blow for him to accept. That day, when they were strolling in Xiangdi, he was so angry that he didn't even have time to see Yin Sure's face clearly. In his anger, he actually attacked her. When he thought of this, anger, doubt, regret, self-blame, pain, all of these emotions welled up in his heart. I wonder what it feels like. As soon as Yin Sure saw him, she couldn't calm down. Her face darkened as she asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Muxing choked for a moment. He was silent for a while. His face was no longer as fierce as before, and there was a hint of fragility in his aged voice. "I'm here to see you." His tone was careful. He looked at her. There was no need to hide the remorse and self-blame in his eyes. Muxing sized up Yin Sure's delicate features. The more he looked, the more he could see Mu Qingqing's shadow on her face. Alike. They were really alike. Chapter 1202. At this moment, he was even more convinced that Yin Sure was Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood. As for him, for more than a decade he had actually acknowledged the thief as his daughter. The person whom he had cherished so dearly was actually an impostor. At this thought, he felt extremely guilty and remorseful. More than that, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He had almost ruined her. Ruined Mu Qingqing's daughter? His heart was in agony. "Your name is Yin Sure, right?" His voice trembled. "All these years, Grandpa has been looking for you all over the world, but I didn't expect you to." "Shut up." Yin Sure fumed. "You're not allowed to call me by my name. You have no right to call me by my name." The old man's face froze in shock and pain. His mouth trembled uncontrollably as his face turned pale. Sure, don't be agitated. You're injured now. Don't talk anymore." "Shut up. Don't call me by my name." Yin Sure's face hurt as she raged. "You have no right to call me by my name." "Muxing, are you feeling smug now? Are you satisfied now? Isn't it all thanks to you that I'm in this state?" Her cold and indifferent words were no doubt a sharp blade stabbing him. Hearing this, the pain in his heart intensified. His eyes stung, but he had nothing to say. Yes, if he had not been muddle-headed back then, he would not have caused her to suffer so much. It was understandable for her to blame, resent, and hate him. However, this was not what he wanted. He did not expect that he would end up in this state, because of a moment of foolishness. He hurriedly consoled her. Okay. Grandpa won't call you by your name. Let's talk about this after you've recovered, okay?" Yin Sure's face turned cold as she squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. "You're not my grandpa." The old man was stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. Yin Sure added, "Muxing, do you know? When my mother talks about you, she only says that you're a cruel executioner who destroyed her life. You're not my grandpa, and I won't acknowledge you. Give up." Muxing's blow was even more severe. He staggered a few steps backward, his heart aching terribly. He trembled as he clutched his chest, his eyes revealing the pain of being hurt. Sure. Listen to Grandpa's explanation, okay? Grandpa was wrong. Grandpa was really wrong. From now on, Grandpa will make it up to you and make up for the sins that Grandpa committed. Don't be angry with Grandpa. And don't say such cruel words, okay? The old master was an old man. When he was young, he was resolute and decisive. He was an iron-blooded man who stood at a high position. But now, he was humbly lowering himself to beg for her forgiveness. After knowing the truth, he was tormented by self-blame and guilt. Yin Shishir's heartless words were undoubtedly rubbing salt on his wound, making it even harder for him to bear. Yin Shishir sneered. What? Don't you think it's too late to realize your mistake now? If it weren't for you, my mother wouldn't have left me. My brother won't leave me either. You're the one who harmed me and ruined my family. You're a murderer, a cruel executioner. Get lost. I don't want to see you. Get lost. She chased him away. Mu Sheng's body froze on the spot, unwilling to leave. He had yet to take a good look at her. She was injured. He heard that she was covered in blood when she was brought back. Chapter 1203. His heart ached when he heard that, and he wanted to see how badly she was hurt. Now, she was like a hedgehog with all her quills standing up, refusing to let him get close to her. His lips trembled as he choked on his sobs. Yin Shishir's words were heartless and cold. She did not give him any face or a way out of this embarrassing situation. Still, he stubbornly refused to leave. He looked at her with bloodshot eyes. She said, "You're not my grandpa, and I won't acknowledge you. Give up." She continued, "You're the one who ruined my family. You're a murderer, a cruel executioner. Get lost. I don't want to see you." She kept saying that she did not want to see him, and wanted to chase him away. Even though his face was being trampled on, he thickened his old face and refused to leave. He wanted to take advantage of his limited time to see her more. When he heard that she was seriously injured, he was so worried that he did not care that he could not stand for long periods of time. He rushed to her ward to take a good look at her. However, before he could say anything, she said that she did not want to see him. His heart ached as if it was being stabbed by a knife. However, in this situation, he could not blame her or anyone else. He was the one who was muddle-headed and did something stupid. He was too self-righteous, and in the end he overreached himself and made things so out of hand. It was reasonable that she did not want to see him. Shishir Grandpa. When he sensed Yin Shishir's piercing gaze on him, he immediately changed his words to prevent her from losing control of her emotions. I really didn't expect things to turn out like this. If I'd known, I really wouldn't have made such a mistake. I'm old and muddle-headed. I've let you and your mother down. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but don't chase me away. Let me see you more, okay? Let me take a few more looks at you. As he spoke, his emotions were on the verge of breaking down. His voice was so hoarse that it sounded as if it was mixed with gravel. He choked on his sobs. I'm afraid. I don't have much time left. My body is getting weaker and weaker. Every day I live is a day less. I can't take it lying down if I don't take a good look at you. You can scold me. You can do whatever you want, but don't chase me away. I'll stand far away and not make any noise. I'll just watch you like this. That's fine too. After a series of sincere pleas, this superior who had been able to call the wind and summon the rain all his life put down all his arrogance in front of her. His dim eyes looked at her emotionally, as if countless tears would burst out from his eyes in the next second. Yin Shishir, however, remained expressionless from the beginning to the end. She didn't look at him, as if she didn't hear his pleas. She was not in the mood to listen to anything he had to say. Her heart was filled with the safety of the two little fellows. How could she care about anything else? Scram. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you for the rest of my life. Yin Shishir's voice was cold again, but she didn't leave any room for negotiation as she ordered him to leave. Mu Sheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but when he caught a glimpse of her cold expression, he stopped abruptly. Afraid of angering her, he let out a long sigh helplessly. He was on the verge of tears. Really, he felt a little helpless. He didn't know how to make up for the mistakes he had made, and he didn't know how to bridge the gap between them. He was old and muddle-headed. Chapter 1204. At this moment, the person standing in front of him was no longer the domineering Mu family's head, Mu Sheng. He was just a pitiful old man. He was not heartless enough to make things difficult for a pitiful old man. Hence he said, "Grandpa, return to the ward first. Sure is in a bad mood. Let's put this matter aside for now." Okay. Aja, you keep her company. Mu Sheng lamented in his heart. He looked at her longingly before he left with the help of others. After leaving the ward, he stood outside the door. Tears of regret overflowed from his eyes. He raised his old hand and slowly wiped them away. "Master Mu, let's return to the ward, okay?" The nurse, who was watching from the side, patiently persuaded him. Mu Sheng's body trembled uncontrollably. When love became a sin, it was no longer a form of sustenance but a burden. It was a dead end, and there was no way to salvage it. Even if it was an unintentional mistake, sometimes, no mistake could be forgiven. The dispute of 3 generations, could it be that in his lifetime, he would not be able to draw an end to it? Yes, it was his fault, and he was willing to bear it. But he had to give him a chance. In the ward, Yin Shirshir clutched the blanket tightly. No matter how hard she tried to restrain herself, one could vaguely see from her trembling fingertips that she could not calm down. Looking at Mu Sheng, she was reminded of those nightmarish memories. Scenes flashed before her eyes like a merry-go-round. Every frame of the video was shocking to the eye. She hated how strong her memory was. Those frightening scenes had not dissipated even after more than a decade. They remained in the deepest part of her memory, as if deeply engraved by a soldering iron, and could not be erased. That year, when she was 9, she tasted despair for the first time. She could have had an ordinary life, with a mother who loved her and a cute little brother. She also thought that the days would pass by peacefully. However, she really did not know which came first, tomorrow or the accident. What came earlier than tomorrow was an accident. Clearly, this accident should not have happened. If not for that accident, she should be very happy now, right? She knew that she shouldn't be so stubborn on this issue. But even after being stuck in a dead end for more than 10 years, he still couldn't figure out this problem. Mu Yaja sat on the edge of the bed and watched her trembling body from uneasiness and fear. His heart ached as he held her in his arms. Yin Shirshir hugged him back. She had placed almost all of her dependence on him. "It hurts," Yin Shirshir said in a low voice. Her throat was hoarse and choked with sobs. Mu Yaja tensed up and asked with a frown, "Where does it hurt?" He thought that one of her wounds was hurting again. However, he did not expect that she would lead his hand to her heart. "This place." Mu Yaja was stunned. "I feel a little suffocated." Given time, the injuries on his body would heal. However, there were some things from the past that clearly did not leave any wounds, but it was like a thorn in his heart. Every time he breathed, he would feel a faint pain. She could not forgive him. It wasn't that she was cold-hearted. Chapter 1205. She hated him. Every low point in her life had something to do with him. Therefore, she could not force herself to forgive a sinner. Gong Jie had a physically and mentally exhausting dream. In his dream, he could vaguely see the scenery outside the window flashing by. It was so fast that he wondered if he was sitting in a car or on a rocket. It was so fast that his heart was in a mess. Every sharp turn on the mountain road, the friction between the tires and the ground was accompanied by smoke rising in spirals. He grabbed his seat belt in fear and turned around. Through the rear window of the car, he could see rows after rows of black cars chasing after them relentlessly. Young and ignorant, he had no idea what was going on. He only knew that the car was going very fast. So fast that his heart felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. "Mommy, I'm scared," he shouted nervously. Mu Qingqing gripped the steering wheel nervously and stared straight ahead. In this tense moment, she could not care less about comforting the 2 frightened children. "Don't be scared. Big sister is here. Big sister will protect you." In the front passenger seat, a girl who looked similar to him turned around and looked at him gently. Even though she was also scared, she still pretended to be calm and comforted him. "Big sister, I'm scared. Are we going to die? Don't say such things. We'll be fine. Don't be scared." He swallowed with difficulty and said in a weak and helpless voice, "Mommy, I'm scared. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down." As soon as he finished speaking, he stared blankly at the cliff in front of the car, which was surrounded by a fence. He covered his eyes in fear. Then he heard the screeching sound of brakes. The brakes are not working. Ah! Accompanied by an ear-piercing scream. The car broke through the fence and rushed out of the cliff. The car lost control and flipped down the mountain. The world spun, and his little body was knocked around in the car. Then he fainted. When he opened his eyes, he saw his sister dragging his body and trying to pull him out of the car. He wanted to struggle, but to his horror, he found that his arm was twisted at a strange angle, as if a bone was broken. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and a few intermittent sobs came out of his throat. At that time, he actually didn't feel any pain, and he only felt that his senses were muddled and his consciousness was in chaos. In her blurred vision, she could only see her sister's strenuous expression. Then he saw a strange movement from the corner of his eye. He saw Mu Qingqing in the driver's seat, her face covered in blood. "Mommy!" Just as he reached out his hand. In the next second, there was a boom. The car burst into flames, and a heat wave swept over them like an avalanche. The flames soared to the sky. The whole car was ablaze. The huge fire instantly engulfed Mu Qingqing's figure. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief. "Mommy!" In the hotel, Gong Jie suddenly woke up from his dream and sat up. His handsome face was pale with lingering fear. The moment he opened his eyes, he realized that it was a dream. It was that nightmare again. It had been repeated countless times over the past decade. Every time, the scene of his mother being devoured by the scourge from more than 10 years ago repeated itself. "Young Master Gong, did you have another nightmare?" Chapter 1206. The girl was dressed in a tight-fitting camouflage uniform with a bulletproof vest draped over it. Nevertheless, her curvaceous figure was still on full display. The trident on the belt at the back of her waist shone with a subtle luster, while the desert eagle, which gave off a cold gleam, was quietly buckled on the far left, ready to be used at any time. Her two slender legs were tightly wrapped in an ocean camouflage scarf. She wore a pair of suave combat boots with a sharp defensive saber strapped to the inner side of the boots. Her black iron wrist guard was delicately engraved with the image of a vermilion bird bathed in flames. The night breeze blew in through the slightly open windows. The girl's short and elegant blonde hair fluttered in the wind, wantonly invading her ice-cold and beautiful face. Under her handsome brows was a pair of seductive peach blossom eyes. This girl was none other than one of Mercenary Paradise's top leaders, Vermilion Bird. At the same time, she was also Gong Jie's personal subordinate. Gong Jie did not respond, but only frowned slightly. Vermilion Bird served him a cup of tea with a meticulous expression. Gong Jie sipped a few mouthfuls of tea and slowly calmed himself down. He raised his head to glance at her. Vermilion Bird stood beside him with a cold expression and did not utter a word. Gong Jie asked lightly, "Vermilion Bird?" "Yes. Where's the little lad?" "That rascal called Yin Tianyu." She answered. "Yu is on his way to the target location as a hostage exchange." "When do we take action?" "Tonight. We'll set off in the wee hours of the morning to carry out the rescue." Gong Jie asked again. "Has the location been successfully located?" "We've already obtained the precise location. Our men are all present. We'll set off in the wee hours of the morning." Gong Jie cocked a brow and curled his lips into an amused smile. That lad is really something. It turned out that Yin Tianyu had made ample preparations before he became a hostage exchange. He was equipped with a GPS device from head to toe. His necklace, watch, and even buttons were implanted with a mini GPS device. Alas, Mu Lianjue's men were very cautious. After all, they were from the military and were highly vigilant. Hence, they removed all the GPS device from Yin Tianyu's body. Yin Tianyu, however, was not surprised as he had already expected this. These were just bluffs to dispel those people's wariness. Earlier, when Yin Tianyu returned from the Mu residence, while treating his wound, he instructed a doctor whom he had worked with to implant a nano-positioning chip into the skin of his shoulder. This nanochip was a super chip that he had developed. It was anti-shielding and had a very strong positioning ability. It could be controlled within a range of 100 meters, which was practically a black Yin Tianyu and had yet to be developed. He guessed that Mu Lianjue would use a high-tech shielding device to block all GPS signals in order to deceive others. However, Those shielding devices were completely useless against the super nanochip he had developed. Even 100 secrets would have a flaw. 1 Mu Lianjua. Mu had Mu. By Mu's, Mu was. Even if there was one, it would be blocked by the device. In such a large area, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find a hidden spot for the hostages. Chapter 1207. If Mu Lianjue got angry, the hostages' lives might be in danger. He had many concerns about this. Hence, after much consideration, he decided to propose a hostage exchange. That was because he had a nano chip on him, so the anti-jamming device was useless. If he exchanged with his mother, at least his men would be able to track their location and infiltrate the place. He would not take the risk if he was not fully confident. He told Muyaja all his plans. Muyaja thought about it for a while and felt that the plan was feasible, so he agreed to it. Early the next morning, Muyaja would hold a board meeting and sign the share transfer document with Mu Lianjue. Before that, they had a full 10 hours to carry out the operation. Vermilion Bird thought coldly, 10 hours? That's enough. Her company would only need an hour to resolve this matter perfectly and bring the two lads back safely. Of course, it was not just a company. Gong Jie and Vermilion Bird arrived at Leji's headquarters. The meeting room had been temporarily changed into a battle command room. When they opened the door, they saw two companies of mercenaries standing in the meeting room. Mercenary Paradise's other ace leader, Anjia, was also present. The two companies that were present, added together, only had a total of 30 people. However, these 30 people were not to be underestimated. A month ago, there was political chaos in Libizan. Mercenary Paradise accepted the request and sent out two companies, which easily annihilated the armed forces of thousands of rioters. No matter how strong a team was, in front of the ace mercenaries of Mercenary Paradise, they would be unable to withstand a single blow. It would be difficult for them to even stand a chance. This was also one of the reasons why Mercenary Paradise had been the leader of the mercenary groups for the past 10 years, with no one able to shake their position. Vermilion Bird clapped her hands and walked to the conference table to gather everyone. She then simply assigned the operation plan. Anjia was in a camouflage uniform, but his handsome face was full of unruly contempt. In fact, as one of the 4 ace leaders of Mercenary Paradise, he was undoubtedly powerful. It was just that this operation was not difficult and did not require him to be involved. However, in order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he was also assigned to the operations department to participate in the plan. He crossed his arms and leaned against the door. His face was expressionless as he held a cigarette in his mouth. He looked frivolous and frivolous. After announcing the plan, the Vermilion Bird coldly shouted, "Is everything ready?" "Ready. Move out." On the side, Lisa stood up quietly. She lowered her eyes and lazily hugged her wrist joints, making cracking sounds. Everything was prepared in an orderly manner, as if there was a special kind of tacit understanding between the two of them, which happened to coincide with each other. Vermilion Bird walked up to Lisa. "Lisa, you sneak in and fight first. Take your men and retreat first. Leave the rest of the battlefield to me. Understand?" Lisa curled her lips in silence. She did not respond, but gave her an understanding look. Vermilion Bird had sent Lisa to lead the infiltration, because she believed in her combat ability. Gong Jie walked into the CEO's office. The moment he opened the door, the room was empty. The CEO's office was designed according to Yu Yu's design. However, it was always used by Li Hanlin. Usually Yu Yu worked in his study. It was not until recently that he moved his office to the CEO's office. Gong Jie walked to the bookcase. It was a row of reference books. Chapter 1208. He casually picked up an English reference book and flipped to the first page. It was filled with Yin Tianyo's footnotes. His neat and tidy English handwriting was delicate and beautiful. The corners of Gong Jie's eyes twitched violently. This child was truly heaven-defying to an indescribable extent. He could already master a foreign language so skillfully at such a young age. Then again, it made sense. Programming required a strong foundation in a foreign language. Gong Jie wondered if this child had a genetic mutation. In a way, this child's talent was already beyond the realm of mortals. Gong Jia placed the reference book back on the bookshelf and surveyed the high-tech office. His gaze was attracted by a huge poster on the wall. It was a portrait of a celebrity. This was a set of fashion photos taken when Yin Shirshir and Gu Xingze were interviewed by a magazine back when they were filming a movie. The stylist and photographer were the best team in the industry. Hence, when this set of posters was released and exposed on Weibo, it attracted a lot of attention. This set of posters was so popular because the stylist posted 2 photos before and after the retouching on Weibo. One was the original photo, and the other was the edited version. The photos were exquisitely taken. In addition, other than the overall rendering of the images, Yin Shirshir's face could be omitted from the post-production digital embellishment. In the entertainment industry, many celebrities relied heavily on makeup and strong post-production for their photo shoots. For example, Han Yuyan's shortcoming was that the outline of her eyebrows was not deep enough. When taking photos of some international celebrities, a lot of effort was needed in post-production. Yin Shirshir was different. The post-production adjustments to her face could be said to be imperceptible. What was more amazing was that her makeup was very light and thin. Her facial features were still exquisite. There was an uproar in the industry. Yin Shirshir's beauty was also sought after by many international celebrities. Hence, Qin Zhou's hands were sore from accepting endorsements. This set of posters was the one that Yin Tianyu was most satisfied with. The overall style was a fresh garden style. She wore a pink dress with rose embellishments, which made her look pure and graceful. She wore a knitted corolla on her head, and her hair flowed elegantly. She held a bouquet of fresh flowers in her hand. As she sniffed the flowers, her beautiful eyes sparkled. Yin Tianyu loved this poster so much that he enlarged it and hung it on the wall of the office. Every time he looked up, he could see this poster. He often stared at this poster in a daze. Now, Gong Jia was also looking at this poster and fell into a state of shock. It was not because of anything else other than her facial features in the pictorial, evoking a strong memory in him. Gong Jia walked up to the poster in a daze. His brows furrowed slightly as he reached out and caressed the poster with his slender fingers. The people in the picture were so lifelike that he momentarily forgot that it was just a poster in front of him. What was going on? Why did the woman in the poster overlap with the girl's bright and gentle smile in his memory? Was it her? How could it be? Gong Jia's breathing quickened. His fingertips suddenly trembled. Suspicion flashed across his eyes. Who was this woman? Who exactly was she? Chapter 1209. After more than a decade, a person's facial features would change as they grew older. However, the silhouette would not change. That pair of eyes, in particular, were exactly the same. Could there really be 2 people with the same face in this world? It couldn't be her, could it? Just as this thought popped up in his mind, Gong Jia ruthlessly overturned it. How could it be? She was already dead and no longer existed in this world. How could it be her? Gong Jia's emotions fluctuated slightly. His handsome face was filled with incredulity and doubt. He suddenly turned around and walked toward the door, only to bump into Li Hanlin, who had just pushed the door open. Second Master Gong? Li Hanlin was startled by his tense expression. Startled, he cautiously asked, "Master Gong, what's the matter?" Gong Jia suddenly grabbed his collar agitatedly. "Let me ask you, who is that woman? What's her name?" Gong Jia pointed at the woman in the poster and questioned him anxiously. Li Hanlin was baffled at first, but when he looked in the direction he was pointing, he saw Yin Shirshir's poster. He could not help feeling that Gong Jia's reaction was a little strange. "What's the matter, Master Gong? Answer me immediately." Gong Jia's expression was different from his usual elegance. He appeared nervous and anxious. "Answer me, who is this woman? Why is her poster hanging here?" "This," Li Hanlin pursed his lips and calmly answered. "This is Director Yun's family." "Family? What family?" "As for the specific relationship, Master Gong can ask Director Yun when he's back." Li Hanlin was cautious though. Yin Tianyu had specially instructed him not to casually reveal his relationship with Yin Shirshir to protect her. Therefore, without Yin Tianyu's permission, he naturally kept his mouth shut and did not reveal too much. Gong Jia frowned. But when he saw Li Hanlin's cautious and reserved expression, he did not pursue the matter. He anxiously smoothed his fringe, but his heart could not calm down. In the ward, Yin Shirshir was drenched in cold sweat as she sat up from the bed. The darkness that entered her eyes made her feel uneasy as she looked around. Muyaja? Suddenly, there was the sound of a thin rope moving beside him. Then, a warm and broad hand gently covered the back of her hand. I'm here. Yin Shirshir nervously held his hand and did not let go. Muyaja sensed that something was wrong with her. He moved closer to her and hugged her shoulders. What happened? I dreamed that Yu and Xiao Yichen were in danger. Yin Shirshir's voice was filled with helplessness and sobbing. She didn't sleep well the whole night. She was always in a half-awake state, in a trance, and had nightmares. It was always related to Yu and Xiao Yichen. In her dream, she actually dreamed that Yu and Xiao Yichen were being chased by people. They were shot and bled to the ground. Only then did she wake up from her dream in a cold sweat. Muyaja hugged her tightly. Don't be afraid. This is just a dream. It's just a nightmare. Muyaja reached out to turn on the light. Pa! The light flashed and turned on. Yin Shirshir instantly felt that the light was dazzling and covered her eyes in discomfort. Her hands were suddenly taken away by him. Muyaja lowered his head and pressed his lips against hers, sealing her trembling lips. The kiss was lingering and enchanting. Chapter 12:10. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Don't worry. She tossed and turned in bed the entire night. She even hid under the blanket and cried sadly behind his back. It wasn't as if he couldn't hear her sobbing. His heart ached. He was also worried about Yu and Xiao Yichen's safety. Previously, he had repeatedly asked Yu if he needed to send more men to participate in his plan. Yu had the demeanor of a king. He waved his hand and said casually, "No need. Daddy's men aren't good enough. Daddy just needs to protect Mommy. That's enough." In other words, he was telling him that his men were well trained. This was undoubtedly a shot of confidence for him. Therefore, his most important task now was to stay by her side and accompany her without any distractions. This was what he had promised Yu. He had to do it. Yin Shirshir was shocked. She closed her eyes and her breathing quickened. Under the light, there was a faint tear at the corner of her eye. It was hard to notice. When I was 9 years old, I lost my family and had nothing. I've already tasted the pain of losing a loved one. So now, I can't lose Xiao Yichen and Yu too. Muyaja frowned slightly. He might not be able to understand Yin Shirshir's uneasiness and worry as a mother. However, as a father, he also felt inexplicably anxious and worried. However, he needed to deal with this matter calmly. The first thing he needed to do was to stabilize her emotions. Shirshir. He lowered his head and whispered her name. Yin Shirshir looked up and heard him say in a deep voice, "When the two little guys come home, let's get married. Let's get married and be together forever, okay?" Yin Shirshir looked up in shock. She was obviously shocked by his words. Was this a proposal? He held her hand, bowed his head, and gently kissed her fingertips. He said tenderly, "I've thought about it carefully. I don't want to delay the marriage any longer. When this is over, let's get married and be together for the rest of our lives." Yin Shirshir opened her eyes in a daze. For a moment, her heart was filled with mixed feelings, and she found it difficult to digest. "Promise me, Don't let your imagination run wild." Yin Shirshir was still in a daze. Muyaja suddenly felt a little nervous. What happened? He turned her shoulder and looked at her inquisitively. "You don't want to?" Yin Shirshir shook her head. "I just couldn't believe that such a day would come. Trust me, there will be." Muyaja kissed her gently and pressed against her forehead. He promised there will be. In the underground warehouse, Yu, who had always been a clean freak, gently brushed the dust off her sleeves. Her thin face was calm and composed, without a trace of fear. Outside the iron prison, a few soldiers stared at her with their mouths agape. This child was way too calm. Her face was indifferent and expressionless. If it were any other child, they would probably be wailing in panic by now, wouldn't they? "Hey kid, I didn't know that you're a clean freak." A man couldn't help but tease. Since they were guarding the two children, they naturally let down their guard. Yu glanced at them coldly and asked, "What time is it?" Why are you asking about the time for no reason? It's 12 o'clock. Chapter 12:11. Wuxia turned around and looked at him in surprise. Yu pursed his lips silently. It was not that he had a timer on him, but he had been silently calculating the time in his head ever since he was locked up. Although it was impossible for him to be accurate, it was not far off. In this aspect, his concept of numbers was unbelievably sharp. The man was stunned. He looked down at his watch and was shocked. 11:30 a.m. Not a minute off. The man frowned suspiciously. How did this child know the time so accurately? Could it be? Thinking of this, he opened the cell door and walked in front of him. He searched him from head to toe, but did not find anything suspicious. The man was even more surprised. Hence he asked, "How did you know what time it is?" Yu said lazily, "I guessed." The man was still skeptical. He felt that there was something fishy, but he could not find any loopholes. He could not help but pat his face. "Kid, I'm warning you. Don't play any tricks. Do you understand? Even if I play any tricks, what can you do to me?" Yu raised his eyebrows and retorted coldly. There was a hint of mockery in his cold voice. It was undoubtedly a provocation to the man. The man laughed coldly, and used the way he usually used to scare children to scare him. "So what? I can kill you and feed you to the dogs." Wuxia was furious when he heard this. However, Yu said casually, "If you kill me, you'll die with me." The man was stunned, but he said disapprovingly, "Why do I have to die with you?" "Because I can't die. Otherwise, how can your master use me as a hostage to get Mu Corporation's shares?" Yu's lips curled into a mocking smile. The man was so shocked that his jaw dropped. It was not easy to fool children these days. They were all cunning. The man snorted. "Good. Kid, you know a lot. But there's one thing you're wrong about. Hostages don't have to be kept alive. By the time fourth master gets the shares of Mu Group, your life will be over." Yu heard his unfriendly tone and threatening gaze, but her face remained calm. She only smiled slightly and said, "Why? You want to kill the hostage?" The man was even more shocked in his heart. This little guy looked no more than 5 or 6 years old, but whether it was his temperament or the way he spoke, they were all quite mature. The man smirked. "What's wrong? Are you afraid of killing the hostage? So if you don't know your place and keep your mouth shut, I don't mind giving you a taste of my power." Yu raised his eyebrows lazily. His eyes were as cold as stars, but it was as if he was deliberately provoking him. He mocked coldly. "Other than threatening to kill the hostage, what else do you have? Aren't you childish?" The man was furious and grabbed his collar. He frowned and said, "Boy, you're deliberately going against me. Do you really think I won't dare to beat you?" Suddenly, a strange noise came from behind him. The man's attention was attracted, and he was about to turn around to find out what was going on when Yu smirked coldly. "What are you laughing at?" The man hated his smile. It always made his heart numb uncontrollably and made him feel uneasy. "I'm laughing at your stupidity." Yu straightened his back. He had an arrogant and domineering aura. He had inherited Mu Yaja's indifference and arrogance. Chapter 12:12. You're about to die, yet you're still so arrogant. Little brat, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The man smiled strangely, squatted down, and patted his cheeks. The corners of his lips curled up, and the viciousness in his eyes was like a sharp knife, merciless and bloodthirsty. He tilted his head and looked at him, then frowned and asked in confusion, "Little brother, how do you want to die? I can't think of an interesting way to torture you, but you're really an eyesore. What should I do?" "Haha, who's the one who's about to die?" Yu mocked mercilessly. His childish voice carried an aura like that of an Azura. The man was shocked, and then his face became angry. He raised his fist in a frenzy, intending to teach this little brat a lesson. However, before he could punch him, he saw his body stiffen and then tremble violently. Without a sound, a bright-colored tattoo blossomed on his chest like a flower. Ugh! He felt that his chest had been ruthlessly penetrated. He turned his eyes stiffly and lowered his head to look at his chest that had been penetrated by a silenced bullet. He frowned, and before he could understand what was going on, his body swayed and he fell to the ground. The moment he fell, Lisa stood upright behind him. She coldly glanced at the man from the corner of her eyes, and lifted her leg to kick him away. Hindrance. Muichen was shocked. The girl in front of him clearly had the aura of 8 or 9 years old, but for some reason, she had a dangerous aura of death on her body. An aura like that of an Azura. It was said that girls were like a flower. However, if he had to use a flower to describe her, then it would be the red spider lily. The gentleness of a demon. According to legend, the flower that willingly entered hell and was sent back by the demons, but still lingered on the road to the underworld. The demons couldn't bear it, so they agreed to let her bloom on the road to guide and comfort the souls leaving the human world. Beautiful, but deadly dangerous. Xiao Yichen looked at her in a daze. The girl had a beautiful and delicate face, softening the gentle beauty of the East and the deep European bloodline. However, her eyes were empty and cold, but filled with murderous intent, like a war machine that existed for the sake of killing. She had no 7 emotions and 6 desires. Muichen's gaze trailed down and was immediately stunned by her toned and powerful muscles. No wonder he didn't notice when she appeared, even though he was well trained. What kind of cruel and terrifying training did she have to go through to reach such a level? She was like a ghost, silent and without a trace. How did she manage to sneak in without anyone noticing? Muichen glanced at the corpse at her feet with lingering fear. A hint of wariness surfaced on his face. Who are you? Lisa looked at him and walks to him. You, Shu. Lisa glared at him coldly. She put her finger to her lips and silently signaled for him to keep quiet. Big brother, she's my bodyguard, replied the boy blandly. Little Yichen. An 8 or 9 year? Just as he was in a mess, Lisa squatted down beside him, aimed the gun at the chains that locked his wrists, and pulled the trigger. Clang. The chains broke. Lisa then broke the chains on his ankles. Muichen's limbs were finally free. Lisa walked to Yu's side and bent down. Chapter 12-13. Muichen stood up and walked out of the cell. His face turned pale with fright. Outside the cell, there were a few cold corpses lying on the floor. Some of them were sitting close to the wall with their heads tilted to one side. Their eyes were wide open and red and white stains were splattered on the wall. Some of them were lying on the floor in a strange posture. Blood was flowing on the floor like a river. They seemed to have been dealt with silently. They did not even have time to react before they died. What was more frightening was that they did not struggle at all. Muichen was shocked. When did this happen? Could it be that these people were dealt with by that girl? He had never seen anyone with such terrifying skills. He was actually able to get rid of more than 10 people in one go without him noticing. Some of these people were well-trained assassins. The rest were Special Forces soldiers with extraordinary aptitude in the military. Special Forces soldiers. What kind of concept was that? They were agile and had outstanding awareness. There was no doubt about their combat ability. Yet this girl had relied on her own strength to take care of all of them. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Muichen was so shocked that he could not control himself. The impact of the scene was so strong that he was a little dazed. Suddenly, Muichen thought of something. He quickened his pace and looked at the corpses one by one. However, when he saw a corpse leaning against the wall, he was stunned and immediately walked over. The man leaning against the wall had a hideous and terrifying scar on his face. His expression was one of terror. His eyeballs were bulging and there was no sign of struggle. Obviously, he was dealt with in an instant. Muichen looked at him deeply. There was a hint of pain on his face. He suddenly raised his hand and covered his eyes with his trembling hand. He felt a little sad and pain in his heart. I'm sorry. His lips trembled slightly as he uttered these 3 words. In fact, in his world, there was a clear distinction between good and evil. There was a clear distinction between right and wrong. Initially, he was filled with hatred and contempt towards this man. However, he gradually realized that this man was different from the others. On the surface, he looked ferocious. With a hideous scar on his face, he looked like a malicious ghost. But if he didn't have this scar, he would be a kind-looking man. Muichen had always been grateful. When he was being tortured, it was this man who came and stopped him at the right time. It was also this man who gave his porridge to them. At that time, he was injured and had a fever. It was also this man who took off his jacket and gave it to him. In his mind, The words that the scarred man had said to him suddenly rang out. I don't have any other intentions towards you. I just feel that there's still some conscience in my heart that I can't get over. Suddenly, images flashed before his eyes. The knife-scarred man was sitting outside the iron prison. When he looked at him, there was a trace of genuine tenderness in his eyes. I have a daughter too. She's about the same age as you. The reason why I'm doing this is to give my daughter a better life. But I realized that I seem to have taken the wrong path. I've decided that once I'm done with this, I'll wash my hands of this business. Chapter 12:14. Kid, don't worry. When the time comes, I'll secretly let you go and let you reunite with your son. You're a smart kid. Don't make a fuss, understand? Bear with it. When they're resting, I'll create an opportunity to let you go. Mui-chen stood up slowly and gave him a solemn military salute. Xiao-Chen? At this moment, Yu had also been unchained and walked over. Hurry up and leave. Someone will be here soon. We won't be able to leave. Just as he finished speaking, he heard someone open the locked door of the warehouse in the dark. The next second, the door suddenly opened wide. A wave of fully armed soldiers walked in with their guns raised. The lights in the warehouse were instantly turned on. The leader of the soldiers walked in. However, when his gaze fell on the corpses all over the floor, he was stunned. What's going on? He shouted, but no one responded. The people who were assigned to guard the warehouse had all been killed by Lisa, so no one responded. His eyes widened in shock as he slowly looked around. All 12 of them had been killed without a sound. The scene was very clean. There were no traces of a struggle at all. He widened his eyes in disbelief. His eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. He raised his head and looked at the 3 children. Complicated and bewildered emotions flashed across his face. Then, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Could this be the work of the 3 children? Lisa shielded Yu behind her. Mui-chen also looked at them cautiously. Hold them down. The man ordered sternly. Lisa said coldly, I'll cover you. You guys retreat. Mui-chen did not say anything. He grabbed Yu's arm and ran toward the back door. There was an iron gate that was originally tightly sealed. However, no matter how intricate the lock was, in Lisa's hands, she could pry open 20 locks in a minute while blindfolded. It was completely vulnerable. The man was shocked and shouted, Catch those 2 children, don't let them run away. One of the soldiers raised his pistol and aimed at Mui-chen's calf. However, Lisa was 1 step ahead of him. She raised her gun and fired. In the blink of an eye, it naturally flew out of the barrel, cut through the air, and aimed at the pistol in the soldier's hand. Pung! The bullet accurately hit the muzzle of the handgun in the soldier's hand. The handgun made a deafening sound and exploded in the soldier's hand. The poor soldier's hand was covered in blood from the explosion. His hand that was holding the gun was blown apart, and he let out a cry of pain. The captain was stunned. He did not expect this seemingly harmless young girl to have such superb marksmanship. Kill her. He issued another order. However, the girl suddenly put away her gun and pulled out a short dagger from her waist belt. Her figure flashed, and her nimble figure rushed into the crowd like a ghost. She raised the short dagger in her hand. Under the light, the short dagger shone with a cold and deadly light. Poof! A line of blood splattered. The captain who was giving orders just now was the first to have his neck slit by her. In just a moment, his face was hideous. He held his neck and fell to the ground. The others were even more shocked. However, they reacted quickly and aimed their guns at her. Chapter 12:15. Along with the miserable cries that rose and fell one after another, a few people in the crowd actually fell down sparsely. Shoot her! Shoot her! Someone screamed as if he had seen a ghost. The next second, a cold blade was pressed against his neck. In an instant, his flesh was exposed and hot blood splashed onto the others. Lisa was a famous melee killer. Her attacks were fast, accurate, and ruthless, leaving no room for maneuver. Often, when these people were still aiming, their necks would be slit. Once she attacked, the result would be fatal. Shoot! Shoot! However, before he could finish his sentence, a series of orderly footsteps came from behind him. So many people bullying a child. Child abuse? Heh, interesting. A bright voice suddenly sounded in the empty underground caisson. There was a hint of cynicism in his tone. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and stood up abruptly to look around. They turned around and looked back and forth, but they didn't find any unfamiliar figures. Everyone looked at each other, obviously not knowing where the voice came from. At this moment, a poof sound was heard, and the sound of a silenced gunshot echoed in the silent warehouse. In the crowd, the man who was aiming at Lisa and was about to shoot fell to the ground. The bullet hit him in the middle of his eyebrows, and there was a hole with blood flowing out. Everyone's faces were filled with shock, and they became even more solemn. Everyone present was an elite Special Forces soldier, and each of them had extraordinary skills. However, someone actually broke through the guards outside the caisson and broke in. What was infuriating was that at this moment, he was like a ghost shadow, lurking in a place they did not know, and could easily take their lives. One of the soldiers shouted angrily, "Who is it? Come out." The voice replied lazily, "What a bunch of good-for-nothings." The ghostly voice gradually approached, and it was almost next to the person's ear. The soldier's body stiffened, and he subconsciously wanted to turn around, but a pair of hands mercilessly climbed onto his shoulders. In the blink of an eye, his throat was tightly gripped. Jie stood beside him with a smile, holding Colt tightly with one hand, and pressed it against his temple. He whispered in his ear, "I'm here." Who are you?" Jie smiled gently and raised his head proudly. He recited his impressive opening speech as if he was reciting a book. "I am the Mercenary Paradise's chief commander, Master Jie, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone." Bang! A gunshot was heard. His head instantly exploded. Before the poor soldier realized what was going on, he fell at Anjali's feet. "You dare to be arrogant with me when you're only at this level?" Jie raised his head lazily and warned the group of people who were ready to make a move. "Don't take advantage of a hero, or your head will explode." Just as he finished speaking, a man swiftly took out a pistol and pointed it at Jie. However, before he could raise his hand, another gunshot rang out. The man fell heavily to the ground, his head bleeding profusely. It was as if the Grim Reaper was just around the corner, and as long as he stretched out a finger, he would be dead in the blink of an eye. It turned out that there was more than one person. "Looks like there's another powerful sniper." Jie looked at the body on the ground and sighed. "Didn't I tell you not to move? Bullets don't have eyes." Chapter 12:16. You retreat first, leave this to me. Lisa turned around and left first. In a flash, the special forces that rushed in quickly surrounded Jie and aimed their guns at him. However, no one dared to be the first to shoot. Jie lit a cigarette absent-mindedly and cast a sidelong glance around. "Red Sparrow, I'll leave the rest to you." At the door, Red Sparrow was fully armed and slowly walked in. She played with two tri-edged bayonets in her hands with a cold sneer on her lips. With a wave of her hand, a silver light flashed and the bayonets mercilessly cut open the necks of the surrounding enemies. She quickly unfolded her windbreaker and turned around, bending over to block the spurting blood for Jie. With a gloomy gaze, she looked around and ordered in a low voice, "Go!" In an instant, the warehouse was lit up. A few figures rushed in as Red Sparrow's subordinates kicked open the door and barged in. Vermilion Bird leaped into the crowd. Thunder turned around, and the dagger in his hand spun rapidly in his palm. It was as if the dagger in his hand was spinning at an extremely fast speed. In an instant he sealed their throats. Vermilion Bird spread his arms and spun around, and several people fell to the ground. Even small shrimps are so arrogant these days, forming gangs and forming gangs. How dare a few big men bully a child? You made me waste my vacation on you. Jie threw a left hook and knocked down two men. He stomped on them and cursed seriously. "I worked hard for a year and finally got a vacation. Give it back to me. Give it back to me." Jie is so cruel. A mercenary muttered in a cold sweat as he knocked down an enemy. Jie rarely gets a vacation. He must be in a bad mood to be assigned to a mission. Another person pursed his lips and expressed his understanding. That person silently complained. "The key is that the mission is to deal with a bunch of trash. It's not challenging at all." Jie glanced at them coldly. "You talk so much on a mission, are you tired of living?" Then he turned around and lifted his long leg, kicking a man who wanted to sneak up on him to the ground. On the other side, Red Sparrow's skills were flawless and neat. She grabbed the man's throat with both hands and twisted it, sweeping out a flying kick. Her cold and hard temperament was as sharp as a knife, as cold as a sword, and her fierce aura was like that of an Azura. Anjia is still so ferocious. It's quite scary. Anjia's partner, Luca, walked in with his arms crossed. He casually looked around and clicked his tongue in amazement. Then he saw a man in black flying towards him. He calmly dodged the attack. The man howled in pain on the ground, struggling to hold his abdomen as he rolled around. Luca calmly stepped on his head and ravaged it mercilessly. As he did so, he said lazily, "Don't you know that China has a law protecting minors? What kind of man is he to bully 2 children?" Bang! 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 The sniper sounds hidden in the darkness rang out one after another in the silent basement. The sound of bullets piercing through hearts like meteors, accompanied by the sound of people being shot, rose and fell one after another. These weaklings aren't even enough for me to play with. Luca used his hand as a knife and knocked one of them unconscious before kicking him to the side. He then whistled at Anjia. "Don't go overboard. It won't be fun if you make a big commotion." It was inevitable that the government would be alerted and escalate to an international incident. Then it would be meaningless. Chapter 12:17. How dare you interrupt my vacation? Go to hell. His attacks were vicious and ruthless, even mercilessly aimed for the man's groin. Luca and Vermilion Bird's faces darkened as their eyes twitched. The country's special forces were indeed famous, but when they met Mercenary Paradise's 2 trump cards, Vermilion Bird and Anjia, they were at best small fry. In the blink of an eye, the ground was littered with people. Anjia, on the other hand, was still venting his anger mercilessly. "Get up! Did I make you fall?" Anjia picked up a pitiful man and pinched his philtrum with a smirk. He then executed a beautiful 1-inch punch with both hands. After a few punches, the man let out a few intense cries and fainted. "You can't even take a beating. Is that all you've got? You can't even withstand my gaze." Angrily, Anjia cupped his fists and ruthlessly kicked the lower bodies of the men on the ground. Luca covered his eyes and shuddered in fear at the sight. It was too brutal. When Anjia was vicious, he was practically a murder weapon. Hence, when Vermilion Bird and Anjia's other team arrived at the scene, they had already cleaned up the place. The people had already been cleaned up, and those who remained were either dead or injured. It was a tragic sight. Everyone's eyes twitched violently. Could it be that they rushed here fully armed just to collect the corpses? ===. It seemed that they, the corpse collecting team, had nothing to do with this. "Where's Yin Tianyu?" Luca walked over and asked Anjia. Anjia replied. "Lisa covered them as they left. We'll gather at the bridge entrance in 20 minutes. Then let's leave too." Lisa covered Yu and Mui-chen as they got into a car. Mui-chen's heart was slightly at ease when he got into the back seat. He raised his head and asked quizzically, "Yu, who is this girl?" Lisa glanced at him from the corner of her eyes, her gaze cold. Along the way, she kept a cold face and did not say a word. If not for her flesh and blood, and the warmth of her body reminding him that she was a living person, Mui-chen would really doubt whether she was a human or a robot. Yu said, "This is my bodyguard." Death guard. Mui-chen's eyes twitched. He naturally understood what a death guard was. Most of the death guards were assassins and mercenaries who secretly protected their employers. If necessary, they would even sacrifice their lives. It was a rather cruel profession. However, he never thought that this girl would be a death guard. She was still so young. Mui-chen would not have believed that such a young child could become a death guard if he had not seen her terrifying skills with his own eyes. Mui-chen looked at her with a complicated expression before shifting his gaze to Yin Tianyu. There were too many mysterious things about his younger brother. He wanted to probe further, but he could only wait patiently for the day when Yin Tianyu would confess his identity to him. But now he could not wait any longer. Hence, Mui-chen said in a deep voice, "Yu, there's something that I want you to give me an answer to when we get home." "What answer?" "Your identity." Yu was stunned. He turned to look at him with a slightly changed expression. "Okay." Yu pursed his lips. I'll tell you when we get home. He originally intended to be frank with Mu Yichen when they got home. Mu Yichen's heart warmed as he smiled at him. However, in the next second, there was a dong sound, and a strange sound came from the back of the car. Chapter 12:18. Swish. Swish. Two sounds were heard. Another two bullets pierced through the air and hit the glass, leaving two bullet holes. There's a chase from behind. Mu Yichen was startled and quickly ordered, "Step on the accelerator." The chauffeur stepped on the accelerator at his command. Mu Yichen knocked on the glass and coldly ordered, "The glass isn't bulletproof, get down." He reached out to press Yun Tianyo's head down and protected him in his arms. Lisa, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, rolled down the window and glanced behind her. There were 4 to 5 military vehicles chasing after them. Bullets kept flying toward them. Lisa nimbly dodged one, and a bullet hit the rearview mirror, shattering it instantly. Lisa shielded her eyes with her hand to prevent the glass from splashing into her eyes. She turned her head and spoke in a cold voice, which was rare for her. "Step on the accelerator." Her childish voice was at odds with her cold temperament. Lisa did not dare to relax for a moment. She took out a pistol from her waist belt and waited. She hooked her earpiece and shouted, "Vermilion bird, vermilion bird." After a while, Vermilion bird's short reply came through the earpiece. "Got it." Lisa coldly said, "We're being chased. Quickly come to our aid." "Got it." The car sped along. She stepped on the accelerator, and the car sped along the mountain road. Lisa held the gun and stared at the rearview mirror in the car without blinking, constantly paying attention to the situation behind them. Behind them, 4 military vehicles were still in hot pursuit. The military vehicles were all modified and had excellent performance. The entire vehicle was bulletproof. The magazine in her hand had a total of more than 10 bullets. She had to use every bullet properly and not waste any of them. With just a thought, a meticulous plan emerged in her mind. Lisa calmly removed the silencer. The silencer affected the bullet's power, and was very disadvantageous for long-range shooting. Mu Yichen watched in a daze as she skillfully assembled the gun, and changed the magazine. He was secretly speechless. This girl was really not simple. Disassembling the gun only took a few seconds, and the whole process was as smooth as flowing water. Lisa glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Seeing that he was silently sizing her up, her eyes narrowed and her gaze turned cold. "What are you looking at?" Mu Yichen's face stiffened. Her tone was stiff and cold, giving people the feeling that she was cold and arrogant, without a trace of anger. Lisa said in a low voice, "Listen, don't move. Understand? What can I do for you?" "No need." Lisa looked at the rearview mirror, her face still cold. She said concisely, "I can handle it alone." She was a woman of few words. If she could express something with one word, she would never use two. The car drove onto the main road. Behind them, 5 cars were following closely behind. Although they had stepped on the accelerator to the maximum, the cars behind them were still following closely, and the distance between them was constantly shortening. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, ding ding dang dang. Rows of bullets hit the car door, causing smoke to rise. It was like a death warrant from hell. It was 5 off-road jeeps. Lisa blinked, and the detailed structure of the car instantly appeared in her mind. The driver increased the gear again, stepped on the accelerator, and drove the car to the maximum speed. Fortunately, the car's performance was not bad. At 8,000 revolutions per minute, the car speed was more than 200 kilometers per hour. It sped all the way. In the biting wind, the scenery outside the window flashed by. 6 cars were chasing each other on the spacious mountain road. It was like a scene from a blockbuster movie. Chapter 12:19. Yu was protected in Mu Yichen's arms, so he could not see the intense chase behind the car. However, he could hear the roaring sound of the car engine. Whoosh! Lisa was about to shoot when a bullet broke the window at the back of the car. Clang! The glass shattered and the debris splashed onto Mu Yichen's body. The broken glass scratched Mu Yichen's neck and left a trace of blood. Mu Yichen instinctively hugged Yu tighter. "Brother!" Yu grabbed Mu Yichen's clothes worriedly. Mu Yichen smiled comfortingly and gently stroked the back of his head. "Don't be afraid, Yu. I won't let anything happen to you. Okay?" Yu responded in a low voice. However, he still felt uneasy. Although he was a little awkward, he still forced himself to say it out loud. Stupid brother. I don't want anything to happen to you either. Mui-chen was stunned. His heart melted and he unconsciously smiled. I'll be fine too. Lisa had been looking for an opportunity. However, when the car made a sharp turn, another row of bullets came from behind. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The bullets shattered the glass with a ding-ding-ding sound. Bang! The bullets pierced through the driver's head. Mui-chen's entire body was stained with blood. Shocked, he looked up in bewilderment, only to see the man in the driver's seat convulsing violently. His head had been blasted by a bullet, and his flesh and blood were splattered everywhere. The man stopped breathing in an instant. His body, which was still warm, fell in front of the steering wheel. The car lost control and almost went off the cliff. Lisa rushed over and steadied the steering wheel. She then pushed the body to the side. The car was barely stabilized. However, the accelerator was still pressed down. Yu wanted to look up to see what was going on. Mui-chen did not let him look. Yu, don't look. Ha! What was going on? Mui-chen, who had always been calm, spoke with a hint of fear and trembling. Lisa knelt on one knee and carefully avoided the dense rain of bullets. She held the steering wheel and asked without looking back, "Do you know how to drive?" Mui-chen's brows furrowed. "Who?" Lisa turned around expressionlessly and locked her eyes on him. "You." "I do." "You." Lisa kicked the door open and pushed the driver's body out of the car. Mui-chen carried him to the side and warned him. "Don't move. Do you understand? Don't raise your body. There are bullets behind you. Don't get hurt. Okay. Be good and listen to me." With that, Mui-chen nimbly climbed into the driver's seat, pushed the driver's corpse out, closed the door, and quickly adjusted his seat. He then stepped on the clutch and the accelerator to raise the car's gear. His driving skills were not good. He had touched the steering wheel a little. A year ago, when he drove for the first time, he could drive very steadily. His coach praised him for his talent. It was not his first time driving, so he was not unfamiliar with it. Lisa said, "Step on the accelerator." Okay. He tried to lower his body as he increased the speed of the car to avoid the bullets coming from behind. Lisa used the back of the seat as cover. She knelt on one knee and held the gun. The next corner was her chance. There's a sharp turn in front. Be careful. Chapter 12:20. Mui-chen stared straight ahead with a cold expression. Yu curled up into a ball obediently and did not move at all. There was a sharp turn in front. Mui-chen quickly pulled the handbrake and stepped on the accelerator lightly. The car turned horizontally and horizontally. The friction between the tires and the ground caused sparks to fly and smoke to fill the air. The cars behind them also turned the corner quickly. As a result, a huge weakness was exposed. The most vulnerable part of a car's tires was the side of the tire. It was also the most difficult time to control the car when it was turning the corner. Lisa was waiting for this opportunity. She held the pistol tightly with both hands. Her beautiful eyes narrowed dangerously as she aimed accurately at the two jeeps behind them. Bang! 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 She shot the front and rear tires of the jeep that was in front. The tires exploded instantly. As the car sped into the bend, the result of the flat tire was that the jeep jolted violently. The entire car flipped over, revealing the chassis. The corner of Lisa's lips twitched, and two more shots were fired. The bullets flew through the air. They hit the fuel tank under the car's chassis. At that moment, boom! The car exploded and turned into a ball of fire. The flames soared into the sky. A wave of fire surged over, and a tremendous force of impact swept over with an earth-shattering momentum. Mui-chen felt a burning sensation on his back. A gust of searing heat rushed up and brushed against their backs. Lisa's hair was flying wildly. She squinted her eyes. She had used 4 bullets and had 6 bullets left. Mui-chen turned the corner and stepped on the accelerator. The jeep that was hit by the explosion of the fuel tank lost control and crashed into the cliff wall. The cars behind them were obviously unprepared. The two cars collided and kissed each other intimately. At that moment, it was too late for the car to make it in time. The jeep that was almost burnt to ashes flew for tens of meters. Then the two cars rolled all the way and broke through the guardrail at the same time. They flew out of the cliff. The three cars behind hurriedly braked, passed the burning wreckage, and continued to chase after them. Lisa sat in the car and changed the magazine. Muichen glanced at her from the corner of his eye, and was shocked to find a trace of blood on her cheek. Are you hurt? Lisa looked up coldly at him, but didn't say anything. She just quietly counted the equipment. In fact, the blood on her face was not her blood. However, she did suffer a small injury just now. Amidst the dense rain of bullets, a bullet grazed her headset and grazed her neck, causing a graze on the side of her neck. There was some blood. It was just a minor injury, not worth mentioning. For an assassin who had walked out of a bloody corpse, this kind of injury was nothing to her. Unfortunately, the radio headset was destroyed by the bullet. As a result, they lost contact. Are you all right? Muichen asked worriedly. Lisa didn't even look at him. She lowered her head and quietly inserted the bullets into the magazine. Her movements were smooth and fluid. In a few seconds, she was done with the equipment. Muichen held the steering wheel tightly and secretly sized her up. This girl gave off a cold vibe. She was as cold as death. Other than a murderous aura, there was no sign of life at all. In his heart, a trace of heartache flashed past. Chapter 12:21. In his mind, an 8 or 9-year-old girl should be naive and innocent. She should have a bright and gentle smile all night long. She should be playful, like a little bird. If a girl had to be compared, she should be like a beautiful flower bud that slowly bloomed with youth. She, on the other hand, was like a sharp knife, cold and stern. Whether it was her eyes or her voice, there was no warmth at all. Muichen couldn't help but be distracted for a moment. The car swayed a little. Lisa looked up sharply and looked at him. What's wrong? Nothing. Drive properly, Lisa said again. Her cold and indifferent tone was like an order that couldn't be disobeyed. His tone was as stiff as his instructor in the special training camp, meticulous. She was so young, but she spoke with a little accent. Lisa looked through the rearview mirror and suddenly ordered, "Slow down." "What? Slow down," she repeated again. Muichen was a little confused. The car was rushing forward and it was too late to shake off the three cars. It wasn't easy to get rid of them, but now she wanted to slow down. What was she thinking? Are you crazy? If we slow down, they will catch up again. We can't slow down. Lisa narrowed her eyes. Don't doubt my words. Slow down. You. Muichen was at a loss for words. Listen to me. I will guarantee your safety, Lisa said righteously. Muichen's knuckles turned white as he held the steering wheel. Beads of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. Why? Are you scared? Lisa said coldly. If you are, I will drive. Muichen pursed his lips. Scared? You must be joking. He was born in the military and had experienced life and death situations. Why would he be scared? Yu suddenly said, Brother, I believe her. We will listen to her. Yu's thoughts were simple. Although Muichen and Lisa had undergone hellish training, the two of them were different. Muichen's training was mostly about simulated battles, but Lisa had experienced countless actual battles. Her experience was obtained by shedding blood. In terms of experience, Lisa would not take the risk if she did not have absolute confidence. Muichen gritted his teeth. All right, I'll listen to her. As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes turned sharp. He suddenly stepped on the clutch, lowered the gear, and braked slightly. The three vehicles quickly caught up and fired at him from behind. However, they seemed to have some misgivings. If they could capture him alive, they would not hurt him. Therefore, the bullets were sparser than before. Yu remained motionless in the corner. He had never felt that death was so close to him. It was so close that it felt like it was only an inch away. One of the jeeps stepped on the accelerator and caught up with them. When it reached the side of their car, it crashed into them with a loud bang and forced their car into the middle of the road. The friction between the metal plates caused sparks to fly everywhere. There was a commotion in the car. Lisa said, Step on the accelerator. Muichen tried his best to stabilize the car and stepped on the accelerator. Lisa looked out the car window. The jeep was right next to them. The window rolled down and a man who looked like a soldier shouted angrily at them. Stop the car. Stop the car. However, the next second, the man was stunned. The car that they had chased for so long without being able to catch up with was actually driven by a 7 or 8-year-old child. They were dealt a heavy blow. Chapter 12:22. So powerful. Hit him, Lisa said. Mui-chan quickly turned the steering wheel and hit the jeep. The two cars collided and rubbed against each other. Mui-chan turned the steering wheel again. First he swerved inwards, then he hit the jeep hard. Lisa suddenly raised her hand and aimed at the driver's temple. She pulled the trigger and a bullet went straight through his head. The throat of the soldier in the front passenger seat was also pierced. The car lost control and tilted to the right. Then it hit the guardrail and rolled down the cliff. Boom! A fiery light exploded in the forest along with the rising smoke. The two cars behind them caught up again. One on the left and one on the right, sandwiching their car in the middle. They were neck to neck. Lisa nimbly climbed out of the sunroof and jumped. Her nimble body immediately crouched on the roof of the other jeep. She broke the window of the front passenger seat and jumped in. Before the person in the car could react, she had already given him a concussion from her uppercut. Then, a strong hand grabbed their collar and spun the dagger in her hand. The two pitiful men only felt a chill in their throats. Hot blood sprayed on the back of the seats. The strong smell of blood assaulted their nostrils. In just 30 seconds, the 4 people in the car were taken care of. Mui-chan was stunned. F***ck. Did this girl have to be so fierce? Even fiercer than him. But she was pretty cool. Yu looked at this scene and gulped. Then, she said slowly, "It's too scary to marry such a girl." Mui-chan was silent. At this juncture he was still in the mood to joke. Yu seemed to understand his gaze and said seriously, "I'm not joking. Don't you think she's very violent?" Mui-chan pondered for a moment and admitted, "Yes, she's very violent." Not only was she violent, she was very violent. Yu said, "Violent girls are very scary." Why did he feel that Lisa was very cool? "I still prefer girls who are gentle and cute like my mommy," Yu said softly. Mui-chan was even more silent. Did this kid have an Oedipus complex? This is not an Oedipus complex. Yu seemed to have seen through his doubts and said seriously. Mui-chan felt that he had lost. This kid, did he have the ability to read minds? While Mui-chan was cursing inwardly, the girl had already gotten into the driver's seat. She took control of the jeep, turned the steering wheel, and slammed it into another jeep. It was as if they were going to perish together with the enemy. Mui-chan's heart skipped a beat at the sight. She couldn't be thinking of perishing together with these people, could she? He suddenly had an inexplicable worry in his heart. Lisa controlled the steering wheel tightly. She stepped on the accelerator fiercely and slammed into the jeeps, but with an overbearing aura. Bam! 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 There's a cliff in front. Be careful. Yu suddenly reminded him. Mui-chan looked ahead and saw a straight 90-degree bend not far away. Beyond the railing was a cliff. He suddenly understood what Lisa was trying to do. She was going to hit the last jeep off the cliff. Chapter 12:23. However, they seemed to have forgotten that Lisa's car was the same as theirs. It had been carefully modified and was bulletproof. The bullets that hit the car were light and harmless. Mui-chan's car sped up and quickly turned the corner. Lisa stepped on the accelerator and had no intention of braking. She drove the jeep in front of her out of the cliff. Bang! The two cars sped out of the fence. The moment the car left the ground, Lisa quickly kicked open the door and jumped out of the car. She landed nimbly on the ground. The two cars flew a few meters in the air one after the other. Then, they crashed down the cliff. The cliff was tens of thousands of feet deep. It was not an exaggeration to say that they would be smashed to pieces if they fell down. A few seconds later, there was an earth-shattering explosion from the depths of the cliff. The fire almost lit up the entire valley. The deafening sound of the explosion echoed throughout the entire valley. Amidst the strong wind, she stood at the edge of the cliff. Her hair danced in the wind. Even though she was covered in blood, it did not affect her aura at all. Mui-chan stopped the car by the cliff. When he got out of the car, his hand was already covered in cold sweat. Compared to simulated battles, a real battle was very cruel. In simulated battles, There was still a chance to salvage the situation if there was a mistake. However, in a real battle, if one made a wrong decision, it would be exchanged for a bloody lesson. Muyi-chan and Yu got out of the car and ran quickly to Lisa. When they saw that she was covered in blood, they were shocked. They thought that she was injured. Are you okay? He asked with concern. His face was anxious. Lisa glanced at him. Her lips were extremely cold. I'm still alive. She gave a concise reply and walked towards the car with a blank expression. Her style of speaking was so cool. Muyi-chan muttered in his heart. This girl's ability was indeed not to be underestimated. He trusted the right person. Lisa walked to the front of the car. Just as she was about to get in, her sharp ears caught a slight oddity. She lowered her body and saw that there was already a pool of oil on the ground. Muyi-chan's car had made a sharp turn just now and hit some gravel on the ground. The gas tank was damaged. Lisa frowned slightly. The car's fuel tank was broken. It seemed that it couldn't be driven. She took her equipment from the car and carried her combat bag. Then she turned around and said, "Follow me." Oh. Yu immediately followed him. Muyi-chan chased after her. What's wrong? The car can't be driven? Yes, it's leaking oil. Oil spill. Muyi-chan was taken aback. Thinking back, he seemed to have accidentally crushed a very large rock in his panic. That rock was very sharp, and he was afraid that it had scraped the fuel tank. What do we do now? Let's go back. Lisa raised her head, raised her thumb, and gestured towards the Big Dipper in the night sky. She then pointed into the distance. That's north. Keep going north and meet up with the company. Muyi-chan nodded. The mountain road stretched for thousands of miles to the west. If they wanted to reach the rendezvous point, they would have to pass through a forest. If there were no accidents, they would be able to reach the rendezvous point by dawn. Lisa turned around and looked at Yu. Can you walk? Yes, I'm fine. Only then did Lisa turn around and continue walking forward. Muyi-chan felt that he had been left out. Chapter 12:24. Just as they entered the forest, they saw the headlights of cars not far away. Honk, honk, honk. Rows of military vehicles hurried past the shadows of the trees on the mountain road, causing the earth to tremble. In a secluded thicket, 3 figures were carefully hiding. Lisa peeked through the gaps between the branches and watched the well-trained troops rush toward the east. It was only when the vehicles were far away that Muyi-chan's anxious heart relaxed, and he heaved a sigh of relief. It's not Vermilion Bird's team. Lisa had originally arranged for Vermilion Bird to meet her, but it seemed that this group of people was Mu Lianjue's men. Her wireless earpiece was broken, and she had lost contact with Vermilion Bird. It seemed that she could only rely on herself to reach the rendezvous point. She turned her face, and her thin lips inadvertently brushed across Muyi-chan's fair cheeks. Startled, Lisa looked up, only to see Muyi-chan looking at her calmly. She could not help pursing her lips. The two of them were very close, intimately clinging to each other. Lisa could even clearly hear his scorching heartbeat in his chest. Every beat was powerful. She moved back discreetly, but he held her back with one hand. She could not move an inch. Be careful. The leaves rustled in the wind. The last car passed through the mountain path and gradually disappeared into the distance. Everything returned to normal. What followed was a deathly silence. No one had the tacit understanding to break this silence. Muyi-chan's lips curled up slightly as a sharp dagger was pressed against his waist. Lisa coldly ordered, "Let go of me." She was not used to being touched by anyone, not even a finger. This was her taboo. To Lisa, her only target of protection was Yin Tianyu. Other than Yu, others were not within her scope of protection. Muyi-chan could not help but smile. So fierce? If I don't let go, will you really take action? Lisa did not deny it. I don't deny that I have such a plan. All right. Why don't we give it a try? Muyi-chan's hand, which was on her back, suddenly pressed down on her waist. Lisa was caught off guard and threw herself into his arms. She used all her strength to press down on his body. The side of the forest was a high slope, and the two of them rolled down the slope. A burst of dizziness and chaotic breaths connected. Lisa felt a sharp pain in her waist, as if she had broken a small sapling on the hillside. She raised her head and looked at Muyi-chan's cold expression. She watched as his expression gradually changed from cold to playful. A sense of dizziness followed, and the two of them were still rolling on the hillside. Lisa tried to push him away, but it was futile. With a low gasp, Lisa quickly grabbed the root of a small tree and came to a stop with much difficulty. Lisa's eyes flashed. With a carp flip, she sat on top of him and gripped his throat tightly. With a spit, she spat out the grass in her mouth and coldly said, "Do you want to die?" Yu walked down the hill and glanced at the two helplessly. "You two have such good stamina. Even now, you still have the leisure to flirt." == His words would not stop until they shocked everyone to death. Lisa. Muichen. Don't waste your energy. Otherwise, you won't be able to walk out of this forest tonight. Chapter 12:25. Yu's physique had always been weak. After walking down the hill, he started to pant. He did not exercise much as he had spent most of his time in the hospital when he was young. Although his health had improved, he did not have many opportunities to exercise outside. When Lisa saw that he was panting, she squatted down and said, "Come up." Yu walked around her. "It's okay, I can walk on my own." Lisa did not say anything. She walked in front of him, blocked him, and carried him up in a princess carry. Yu. Lisa was a head taller than Yu, and her physique was also more muscular than his. Her arms were well proportioned and beautiful, having been trained in over 100 battles. In addition, Yu was skinny. Even if she carried him in her arms, she did not feel tired at all. Yu was angry. "What are you doing? You're tired. Put me down." Yu kicked his legs angrily. Lisa stared at him. "Don't mess around." Muichen chuckled behind them. Yu was even more annoyed. He glared at him. "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing." Muichen held back his laughter and followed behind him. His eyes were gentle. The moonlight covered the ground with a layer of frost. The night was getting darker, and the temperature suddenly dropped. The wind in the mountains was bone-chilling. When it blew on her body, it felt like a cold knife cutting into her bones. Gradually, even her hands became stiff and could not move freely. Lisa sniffed her nose that had turned red from the cold. She felt a sense of peace that she had not felt for a long time. She recalled the time when she was in the assassin camp. Every second was like walking on thin ice, and she even had to be careful when she breathed. In this secluded mountain, although she was cold, hungry, thirsty, and in a poor state, she could enjoy the free air without any worries. Nothing was more important than being alive, including dignity. It was by relying on such a shocking will to survive that she was able to walk out of the assassin camp, leave that hellish place, and obtain a new life. Lisa carried Yu and walked quietly on the mountain path. The thick smell of blood lingered at the tip of her nose. The blood on her cheeks had already dried up, and there was a large patch of blood on her chest. At this moment, she couldn't tell if the blood came from her or the soldiers. Lisa lowered her head and looked at Yu in her arms. He closed his eyes in exhaustion. Beside her, Muichen walked side by side with her. In her eyes, Muichen was undoubtedly a high and mighty noble young master. Now that there was no water or food in this wilderness, such a proud and arrogant noble young master would definitely suffer some hardships. As he walked, Muichen suddenly saw a sparkling lake in front of him. "There's a lake." Muichen pointed. His body was covered in blood. The more he couldn't stand the smell of blood, the more he thought about whether he should wash himself properly. As he thought about it, he already had a direction under his feet and walked towards the small lake. Lisa put Yu down and walked to the lake. She stood with her arms crossed and saw that Muichen was already squatting by the lake. "Yu, come here. There's water here, and the water is quite clean." Yu walked over. At this moment, his clothes were in a mess and he looked disheveled. He squatted by the lake and licked his dry lips. He looked hesitantly at the lake water. He wanted to drink it, but when he held it in his hands, he smelled a fishy smell. He wanted to drink it, but he felt disgusted. He stretched out his hand, but withdrew it awkwardly. He seemed to dislike the water quality of the lake. Chapter 12:26. Yu had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He didn't know if the lake water in the wilderness was clean or not. He frowned in disgust. Muichen explained, "It's not smelly. It's just that the water has a strong fishy smell. Fresh water that hasn't been filtered always has this smell. Yu stretched out a finger solemnly. He wet the tip of his finger and brought it to his nose to smell it. Then he frowned deeply. His face was ashen and very ugly. He usually loved cleanliness, and had never even drunk tap water before. How could he tolerate such a terrible water quality now? Lisa walked to the side of the lake and reached out to test the temperature of the water. Although the lake water was very cold, the temperature in the wilderness was already very cold. Therefore, compared to the lake water, her fingers felt a little warmer. She cupped her hands and took a big gulp of the water. The fishy smell of the water rippled in her mouth, and it was hard to swallow. Gulp. Lisa forced herself to swallow it down. Her stomach suddenly felt nauseous and she almost vomited. She frowned and smacked her lips. With a bitter face, she forced herself to take another big gulp. It was very quiet in the wilderness. The sound of her drinking attracted Yu's attention. He turned his head and saw that Lisa had actually drunk a few mouthfuls of water. His stomach felt even more nauseous. Muichen also drank a few mouthfuls of water. The strong fishy smell spread between his lips and teeth. He also almost vomited. It tasted terrible. The fishy smell was so strong that Muichen almost vomited. Yu saw that the two of them were frowning and thought that the water must be very hard to swallow. Therefore, he decided to give up. Lisa took off her outerwear and tore open her lapel. The bloodstains had already dried. Her clothes were tightly attached to her skin. She had to carefully separate them. Then, she dipped her hands in the lake water and washed the bloodstains on her face and chest. The cold lake water drenched her skin. The bone-chilling cold attacked her heart. It was as if even her blood had frozen. She couldn't help but gasp and her hands moved faster. Muichen watched as she calmly took off her clothes in front of him. Since he was young, he had been taught that there was a difference between men and women. Therefore, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He looked away unnaturally and his face was strangely red. When Lisa finished washing and raised her head, Yu was already far away. He didn't force himself to drink the lake water. Even though he was thirsty and the lake water wasn't dirty, it was too hard to drink. Even if he was dying, he wouldn't drink it. Even if he died of thirst. On the way there, Yu decided to rest while the girl went to catch 2 snakes. She skillfully separated the meat from the innards and carefully washed them a few times. She planned to start a bonfire to cook some game to warm her body. While she was gathering firewood, she saw Yu trying to start a fire. She didn't know who misled him, or if it was because this young master's experience in the wild was too pitiful. He casually gathered a bunch of dried leaves and branches together, and clumsily rubbed a branch. However, there was no flame. Yu's expression was very ugly. He looked at the pile of dried leaves and felt depressed. Can't he just drill wood to extinguish the fire? Muichen stood behind him. He wanted to laugh, but after thinking about it, he restrained himself. Chapter 1227. Lisa picked up a lot of dry firewood and gathered a large number of dried leaves. Her movements in the grass attracted Muichen's attention. She sat down on the ground, took out the flint she found, and took out a dagger. She knocked the flint with the dagger, and the sparks fell on the dried leaves. A wisp of smoke rose in spirals. With her efforts, she finally managed to start a wildfire. Lisa expressionlessly threw the dried branches and leaves into the fire. The fierce flames reflected her face red. She suddenly turned her face and looked at Yu, who was not far away, with a gloomy face. She said, "Come here." Yu frowned deeply. He was a little shocked. He started the fire for a long time, but there was no smoke. She made the fire in no time. How did she do it? Lisa skillfully skewered the snake meat and put it on the fire. She broke a few pieces of dry firewood and threw them into the flames. She said expressionlessly, "Rest for a while. We'll be on our way." Yu was stunned. He frowned, stood up, and sat down by the fire. Lisa turned the snake meat on the fire again and sniffed it gently. She could already smell the tempting fragrance. Her expression was calm without any ripples. The flickering flames were reflected in her deep eyes, and the red light flickered. Although the environment was so dangerous, there was no trace of a child's timidity in her fierce eyes. Her face was gloomy and steady, and her lips were cold and arrogant. There was no gentleness in her expression. Mu-Chen saw that her movements were swift. It seemed that she had a lot of experience in surviving in the wild. In fact, Lisa had experienced even more perilous environments than this and had survived them. When she was chased by the enemy army during a mission, she was forced into a dead end and had to escape into the Amazon jungle. In order to avoid being chased, she had to choose the most dangerous and tricky path. There were several times when she almost died in the snake's mouth. Who could understand the fear and trepidation of desperately moving through the jungle filled with the smell of poisonous insects and scorpions? Who could understand the hesitation and despair of curling up in the darkest corner and forcefully swallowing all the painful whimpers into the stomach? This kind of painful tempering had been exchanged for her outstanding skills. Lisa suddenly stood up and threw the leaf bag with the snake meat in front of Mu-Chen and Yu. She said coldly, "Eat it." "I'm not eating it." "Then rest for a while. We'll be on our way." Lisa turned and returned to the fire. After a pause she said, "There are fierce beasts in the forest. We can't stay long." She was exhausted physically and mentally and physically. Camouflage of the night. The night wind in the mountain forest was sharp and bone-piercing. Wolf howls could be heard from afar from time to time. Looking from afar, it was a vast expanse of whiteness. Lisa furrowed her brows and looked at the distant horizon, her sharp eyes shining brightly. It was late into the night. The wind in the forest was cold and strong. Lisa hugged her knees and leaned against the stone wall. Her eyes were slightly closed and her body was tightly bent. The clothes on her body were too thin. If she wasn't leaning against the fire, she was afraid that she would have frozen. She didn't dare to sleep. She didn't even dare to close her eyes for a while. First of all, in the extreme cold, her body temperature would drop very quickly. She was afraid that if she slept like this, she would die. Second of all, the wilderness was too dangerous. How could she let down her guard when there were wild beasts? She had to bring Yu back safely. This was her mission. Chapter 12:28. The fire gradually extinguished, leaving only a few sparks. The firewood had been used up. Lisa curled up, her hands numb from the cold. She leaned against the stone wall to avoid the cold wind. A thin layer of ice seemed to have formed on her face. Every pore was frozen, and it was difficult for her to even blink. She rubbed her hands and exhaled as she looked up at the night sky. Yu leaned against Mu-Chen and closed his eyes to rest. Mu-Chen leaned against the stone wall. His jacket was the one that the scarred man had handed to him. When he put his hands into the pocket to warm them up, he touched something hard. He was secretly shocked and took it out. It was a photo. In the photo, a girl was standing in an amusement park. She had a bright and warm smile on her cute face. On the back was a man's handwriting. "Wuxia, Daddy loves you." Was this his daughter? Mu-Chen frowned slightly and put the photo back into the inner pocket over his heart. He turned around and glanced at Yu. At this moment, he was quietly leaning against him, his head resting on his shoulder. The wind lifted up his ink-black hair, brushing past his pale and thin face, entangling with his eyelashes. He looked a little weak, dispirited, and lifeless. He had to hurry. If he stayed here any longer, he might freeze to death in the wilderness. When the new sun slowly rose in the east, Lisa picked up a pile of leaves and carefully buried the traces of the dry fire. With the help of the sunrise at dawn, she vaguely determined the direction. With her good sense of direction, she slowly walked towards the north. Mu-Chen carried Yu on his back and followed closely behind. In the depths of the forest, the light of dawn pierced through the shadows of the trees. On the treetop, a cobra spat out its dark red tongue menacingly. The bullet pierced through a dark green leaf, and smoke rose into the air. Under the shade of a huge tree, Lisa tilted her head and looked at the cobra that had been accurately shot in the head. She played with the colt in her hand expressionlessly. She picked a few fruits from the tree and took a bite. The sour juice spread in his mouth. She threw it away with a ba sound. The fruit wasn't ripe yet, so eating it would upset the stomach. Mu-Chen looked at her. She was wearing a camouflage combat uniform, and her figure shuttled through the rainforest nimbly. She was like a cute and wild cat. She climbed up the tree and suddenly saw the colorful plants around her. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and play with them. The corner of her mouth couldn't help but reveal a charming smile. He was actually laughing. Muichen's eyes glinted. He actually saw a rare smile on her face. She was so beautiful when she smiled. Lisa's face softened with the mystery of the East and the delicacy of European descent. When she didn't smile, she was noble and cold, like an insufferably arrogant queen who looked down on all living things. When she smiled, there was a hint of gentleness unique to Eastern women. Her eyebrows flowed with charm, charming all living things. The new sun slowly rose from the horizon. In the morning light, the depths of the forest were dark and damp. The smell of poisonous insects and wild beasts filled the forest, one after another. A poison dart frog was perched not far away. Its pair of dull eyes stared at the girl on the tree trunk. From time to time, its stomach would swell and it would let out a strange croak. Chapter 12:29. Lisa hugged the huge combat bag and climbed to a higher place. The smell of the wild was humid and pungent. Mist lingered around the lake. A spearhead viper was coiled on a branch, and its heavy weight made the branch droop. It seemed to have smelled something tempting. It raised its triangular head high, and its vertical pupils focused, gathering a bloodthirsty murderous aura. A dark streak of shadow rushed over. Lisa quickly waved her hand and grabbed the spearhead viper's throat. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she was very dissatisfied with its sneak attack. She reached out and stroked its head. The spearhead viper suddenly opened its bloody mouth, baring its sharp fangs. Lisa's cold eyes met with it. Her gaze narrowed, and her two hands tore the spearhead viper apart. Blood and flesh splattered on the ground, and the corpse was thrown heavily into the grass. A group of ants was ready to move, and they gathered around the body of the spearhead viper. She picked a few ripe wild fruits from the tree and handed them to Muichen and Yu. Eat. Muichen glanced at her, and then took the fruit from her hand. He wiped the dew and mud on the fruit on his clothes and took a bite. It was sour, bitter, and astringent. He frowned. Yu also took a bite, and closed his eyes because of the sourness. The taste was really indescribable. Lisa sat beside him, picked up a wild fruit, and took a bite. She swallowed it calmly. Her body was exhausted, and her stomach was already empty due to the high-intensity battle. So she had to pick some wild fruits along the way to fill her stomach. What time is it now? Yu asked. Lisa looked up at the sky and then said, 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's continue. Yu stood up. We have to get back before 10 o'clock. I'll carry you. Muichen walked forward and said. Yu waved his hand. No need. I can walk by myself. As he spoke, he stubbornly propped up his tired body and walked in front. Muichen's heart ached. He hurriedly walked forward and carefully protected him. In the hospital ward, Mu Wanru was shot in the abdomen. After emergency treatment, she was transferred to the ward for observation. Only then was she out of danger. At this moment, she was lying quietly on the bed, with tubes all over her body. Her face was sickly pale, and she was still unconscious. At dawn, her eyelids trembled and she finally woke up. However, the moment he woke up and opened his eyes, he was shocked by a black shadow sitting on the edge of the bed. That black shadow sat silently by the bed with his back to the window. Against the light, she couldn't see his face at all. She could only feel the cold air emitting from his body. Mu Wanru screamed in shock, breaking the long silence in the ward. Ah! In the next second, the lights flickered and the ward lit up. Mu Lianjue's expressionless face came into view. When she finally saw who was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face twitched violently. She finally heaved a sigh of relief, but she was still frightened by his gloomy face. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a little suffocated. She did not know how long she had been unconscious, but when she finally passed the critical period and woke up in a daze, she could not help feeling nervous when she saw his gloomy face. What happened? Why did he look like this? What exactly happened? He coldly said, Humph, you're finally awake. Chapter 12:30. Fortunately, Muichen was distracted for a split second and opened fire. The bullet penetrated her abdomen, but even so, it almost took her life. Mu Wanru's whitewashed lips trembled. Her heartbeat quickened at his unfriendly tone. Fourth uncle, why do you look so terrible? Did something happen? He snorted coldly and ignored her. Just 2 hours ago, he received a report from his subordinate. The underground warehouse where the hostages were kept had been massacred by a mysterious troop. It was a bloodbath because only a few soldiers survived out of the 100-odd people. Even if they survived, their injuries were very serious. Some of them even lost their heartbeats on the way to the hospital before they could be rescued. The scene was a mess with blood flowing like a river. It was said that there were not many traces of a struggle. It could be said that the 100-odd people were wiped out in a second. As for the 2 hostages, they were naturally taken away, and there was no news of them. Mu Lianjue was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. In a fit of rage, he scolded his subordinates harshly. He had sent 3 batches of troops to guard the place, but they were all taken away. He was so angry that he could not speak. Not long after, there was another piece of news. It was said that the 2 children got into a car and left first. There was no news of the 5 cars of troops sent to chase after them. They followed the tracks on the road and found signs of a car crash at a remote cliff. They speculated that it had been hit and fell off the cliff. It was hard to tell what had happened in the dark of the night. They only knew that the battle seemed to be fierce along the way, but the 2 children were nowhere to be seen. They had sent more men to continue tracking them, but there was still no sign of them. Mu Lianjue's usually calm face showed a rare hint of anxiety. He was burning with anxiety. These 2 children were the biggest bargaining chips in his hands. If he lost these 2 chess pieces, it could be said that he had lost everything. Life or death depended on a single thought. Mu Lianjue's posture, as if he were facing a formidable enemy, startled Mu Wanru. She leaned forward slightly, and was about to ask him how things were going when the slight movement affected the wound on her abdomen, causing her to grimace in pain. However, he suddenly thought of something. Mu Wanru was startled, and her hand slowly moved to her lower abdomen. It was extremely flat. Moreover, the sharp pain from her stomach caused her expression to change drastically. What happened? She gently placed her palm on her abdomen, but she could no longer feel the new life jumping around. In the past, when she touched her belly, she could feel the little life inside. But now it was like a dead pool of water, without any response. Where's the child? Could it be? Child. A look of panic suddenly flashed across Mu Wanru's face. She was so anxious that she couldn't sit still. Mu Lianjue glanced at her, and knew what she was thinking. He expressionlessly asked, "Children? It's gone. The child is gone." Mu Wanru was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. "Yes. Not only the child, but your womb has also been removed. In order to save her, the doctor had no choice but to remove her uterus. Of course, the child was miscarried." Mu Wanru's eyes widened in shock. Her whole face had a strange feeling of emptiness. It was so hard to get the chance to be a mother, but now it was gone. Chapter 12:31. Heh. She suddenly let out a few dry laughs. In her lifeless eyes, there was a bit of grief, a bit of sorrow, but more than that, there was a boundless darkness. As she laughed, her laughter turned into sobs. She clutched her clothes tightly as bean-sized tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. For some reason, when Mu Wanru found out that the child in her womb was gone, her heart sank. When she first found out that she was pregnant, she hated the new life in her womb so much that she could not wait for it to disappear without a trace. She did not like this child. Because this child could not bring her any benefits, she hated this new life that came out of nowhere. However, for the past 2 months, she could feel that the little life in her womb was growing tenaciously. How magical was this? Subconsciously, a trace of maternal instinct was awakened. She was no longer thinking of strangling this miracle of life in her belly. She wanted to give birth to this child and keep it. She wanted to keep her and Aaron's bloodline and raise them. At that time, she suddenly realized that she more or less had some feelings for Aaron. At least, after Aaron was assassinated by Mu Lianjue. She hid under the blanket and cried bitterly for a few nights because of this matter. Now that she found out that the child was gone, she felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. All of a sudden, she understood how Yin Shirshir felt. The child in her womb had once stimulated her maternal instinct. However, the moment she lost her child, that heart-wrenching pain made her instantly understand what kind of state Yin Shirshir was in as a mother. It must be very painful. It must be even more painful than her. She finally understood what it was like to be a mother. Sometimes, people could be so cheap. When they had it, they did not know how to cherish it. Once they lost it, they regretted it. When they wanted to cherish it, there was no chance at all. Why? Why do you care about that bastard in your womb? Mu Lianjue sneered as soon as he said that. Haven't you always wanted to abort this child? This time, your wish is granted. Mu Wanru lowered her head and looked at her flat stomach in disbelief. Her pale face was as if it had been brushed with a layer of white powder. She widened her eyes without blinking and a few drops of tears fell in a daze. Aaron's gentle words suddenly rang in her ears. Rower, come with me. I'll bring you far away from all this trouble. Memories flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. She opened her eyes. Aaron seemed to be standing in front of her, and slowly spreading his palm to her. Don't worry. I'll work very hard to earn money to support the family. Wanru, the child in your womb is our child. I'm willing to acknowledge it. I'm. Deep in my heart, I'm. What about you? Are you willing to give birth to him? Chapter 1232. Wanru, I love you with all my heart. Although I can't give you wealth, I'll work hard and use my hands to create a stable life for you. Wanru, I love you with all my heart and have never changed. For you, I entered the Mu group. For you, I've done so many evil things for you, but now you're leaving me. Wanru, is your heart so hard? Aaron's affectionate eyes were still lingering in front of her. However, in the next second, the scene of him falling to the wall and dying after being shot flashed across her mind. She suddenly broke down and covered her eyes, wailing loudly. Ah, don't die. A voice in her heart screamed in despair. Aaron, don't die. Don't leave me. She curled her body into a ball all of a sudden and started crying in despair and helplessness. Only now did she suddenly realize that she was wrong. So completely wrong. She should not have pushed him away back then. She should have listened to him then. She did not want wealth, nor did she want to worry about food and clothing. She really did not want to live such a frightening life anymore. Looking back, her life was neither long nor short, but it seemed that Alan was the only one who truly loved her and protected her without any complaints or regrets. When they were at the welfare center, the children loved her because she shared her snacks and clothes with them. When they returned to the Mu family, Mu Xing doted on her because she had stolen Yin Shishir's identity. All along, she had been an imposter. If not for this identity, why would he dote on her so much? Aaron, on the other hand, was willing to sacrifice silently for her. He even wanted to bring her far away from trouble and escape far away. At that time he said to her, I'll bring you away. Let's leave this place and live an ordinary life. Even if we don't have great wealth, I'll do my best for your happiness. However, she missed out on such a man who was so devoted to her. At that time, she was greedy for wealth and glory. At that point, she had nowhere to retreat and could not let go. She was indignant, so she did not listen to his advice at all. With so many opportunities, she was perhaps only one step away from happiness. What about now? She was so tired. So tired. All the time. He was trembling with fear and trepidation. She didn't want to live like this anymore. But now it was too late for regrets. There was no medicine for regret in this world, nor was there a second chance. She didn't know what kind of life awaited her. Did Mu Xing see through her identity? Knowing that she had colluded with Mu Lianjue to poison his medicine, and kept the truth from him for years, he must hate her. She was more afraid that he would be disappointed in her than hate her. Mu Xing had always treated her as his own daughter, yet she had plotted against him out of greed for wealth and glory. God, she was really ruthless. Now, she really felt like she had fallen into a bottomless abyss. The child was gone, and her life was in Mu Lianjue's hands. Her life was in danger. She suddenly yearned for an ordinary life. Even if she didn't have power or wealth, if she could have a man who loved her and a warm little family, it seemed so extravagant to her now. She clearly had a chance. She also once had a man who loved her deeply without any complaints or regrets. Chapter 1233. Initially, when the child was still around, she still had a sliver of hope in her heart. However, when she learned that she had lost her child with Alan, her heart seemed to have been torn open with a bloody hole, and she fell into the endless darkness. Mu Wanru was filled with regret. clutching her aching heart. She cried heartbreakingly. "I'm sorry," she whimpered. At this moment, she really regretted everything she had done from the bottom of her heart. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she repeated it 1,000 times in her heart, clutching her heart as tears streamed down her face. She was wrong. She should not have slandered Yin Shirshir as a thief for the sake of fighting for affection. She was wrong. She should not have stolen her jade and replaced her identity for a moment of greed. She was wrong. She should not have schemed everywhere for glory and wealth. She was wrong. She should not have used unscrupulous means to harm Mu Sheng in order to achieve her goal. She was really wrong. She should not have pushed Aaron away. That man who loved and protected her with his life. That man who appeared in her life and once revered her as a treasure. Woo 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 woo. Mu Wanru wailed at the top of her lungs. Having lost her flesh and blood, she was instantly disheartened. It was as if her entire life was bleak. Even breathing was so tiring. Mu Lianjua was frustrated. "What are you crying for? What's there to cry for? Didn't you always not want this child? Isn't it just as you wished now?" Mu Wanru looked up with reddened eyes. Her lips trembled violently as she shook her head, unable to utter a coherent sentence. Woo woo woo. She only cared about crying. She was so sad that she was like an orphan abandoned by the world. Mu Lianjua was so upset that his phone rang at the wrong time. He stood up abruptly and said, "Useless B***tch, do you know that you only know how to cry? My plan has been ruined by you." "What? Those 2 children have been kidnapped." Mu Lianjua paused and looked at her with sharp eyes. "Mu Wanru, oh Mu Wanru, my great cause has been ruined by you." Mu Wanru was stunned, but it was as if something had suddenly burst out from her heart. Her face paled, and she smiled miserably in relief. "Hee. Lunatic." Mu Lianjua swung his arm and left. Mu Wanru looked out of the window expressionlessly. There seemed to be something burning in her heart, turning into a pile of withered ashes. There was no trace of life on her face. "Alan, I was wrong." Her eyes were empty as she muttered. "What glory and wealth? It's all fake, all fake. Only you are real. So can you come back? Come back and accompany me, okay? I'm all alone now. The child is gone. You're gone too. What do I have left? I should have left with you back then. I should have gone far away with you. Away from all these troubles. Why was I so foolish back then? What's so good about glory and wealth?" Memories flew. When they first met in university, Alan stood in front of her with his head lowered and a hint of shyness on his face. "Hello, I'm Han Yimin." Han Yimin was his name. During her 4 years in university, he had always been by her side silently, protecting her without making a sound. Perhaps, in his world, it was just as he said. Being by her side was the happiest thing in his life. Chapter 1234. After graduation, she joined Dishing Financial Group and became the head of the Human Resources Department. He also joined Mu Group and became Mu Yaja's special assistant. All this time, he only had eyes for her. Why was this man so stupid? Mu Wanru suddenly sat up straight and looked out of the window. It was dawn, and the sun was rising from the east. However, her heart was still trapped in the darkness and could not wake up. Her heart was really dead. There was no more life in it. Mu Wanru lowered her head with empty eyes. The tears in her eyes seemed to have dried up, and not a single drop would flow out. She suddenly became ruthless and pulled off the tubes, needles, and respirators on her body. Then she turned over and got off the bed. It was as if she could no longer feel pain. Even if her wound was affected and blood seeped out and flowed down her clothes all the way to her thighs, she seemed to be numb and could no longer feel the pain from her body. Mu Wanru stumbled a few steps and her body swayed. She supported herself against the wall and slowly walked toward the washroom. She walked into the washroom and looked at the mirror. She looked haggard and disheveled. Especially her eyes. There was no color of life in them. At that moment, she actually had some illusions in front of her eyes. In the mirror, Alan and her were facing each other. The tenderness on his handsome face almost made her fall into it. "Wanru, come with me, okay? Let's go far away together and live a happy and ordinary life." "Okay. Is that okay? Is that okay?" he asked gently over and over again. Mu Wanru's tears fell. She could not help but reach out to him. When her fingertips touched the mirror, it was as if she could feel the warmth of his hand. Okay. Mu Wanru smiled sweetly. Her eyes were so gentle that it seemed as if tears were about to drip out. She suddenly put her face against the mirror longingly, as if she was snuggling in his arms. Her weak voice could not help but murmur, "Alan, I was wrong. I really know that I was wrong. Don't leave me. I'm the one who hurt you. I'm sorry. Forgive me, okay?" Mu Wanru cried sadly. "Alan, I was wrong. Forgive me, okay? Take me away, okay?" "Fool." Alan smiled, his handsome eyes overflowing with soft light. "Give me your hand. I'll take you away." Don't be afraid, I will protect you forever." Mu Wanru smiled sadly. Her face finally regained some warmth as she nodded heavily. "Yes. Fourth Master, a few subordinates have sent news that the 2 children have not been found yet, but it is very likely that they have met with misfortune." "What do you mean?" Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes and gripped the phone tightly. "On the road where the child was kidnapped, there was a car accident. The oil tank leaked and exploded. When we arrived, the car had already fallen off the cliff. When we were salvaging the wreckage, we found traces of a chase along the road. He must have gone through a battle. The car fell off a cliff." Mu Lianjue's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes. Then, what are the chances of the 2 children surviving?" "With a 0% chance of survival, the chances of survival are extremely slim. That area is surrounded by mountains. Once you fall off the cliff, there's no chance of survival. How can you be sure that they fell off the cliff? Even if they didn't fall off the cliff, they would have to pass through a forest where wild beasts roam. Plus, it's very cold in the middle of the night. The chances of survival are even slimmer." Chapter 1235. Mu Lianjue snorted. "Whether they're dead or alive, hurry and find those 2 children. I want to see them, dead or alive." "Yes, Fourth Master." He suddenly thought of something and asked, "Also, is there any news from the Mu family?" "No, Fourth Master. Mu Yaja doesn't seem to know about this and thinks that the children are in your hands." "Very good. Report to me immediately if there's any news from the Mu family." "Yes. I'll keep an eye on it. This morning at 9:30 a.m. Proceed as planned." "Yes, Fourth Master." Mu Lianjue hung up the phone and walked into the ward. The moment he opened the door, he was greeted by the smell of blood. Frowning, he walked to the bed, but there was no one there. He had only been gone for about 10 minutes. How did she disappear? His gaze fell on the scattered needles and tubes on the bed. His eyes suddenly caught sight of the blood stains on the snow-white bedsheet. What kind of trouble did that D***MN woman create for him again? He followed the bloodstains on the floor and walked to the bathroom door. The thick smell of blood almost overwhelmed him. He frowned and pushed the door, but it seemed to be locked from the inside. "Mu Wanru, are you in there?" He shouted, but there was no response. He held his breath and focused, only to hear a strange sound coming from the bathroom. Splash, splash, splash. It seemed to be the sound of flowing water. Startled, he did not think much of it. He lifted his leg and kicked the door wide open. Bang! The fragile door was on the verge of collapsing. Mu Lianjue strode in. Just as he entered, he saw Mu Wanru lying beside the bathtub. She was holding a fruit knife and ruthlessly cutting her arms, wrists, and thighs. He was stunned and stood rooted to the ground. Mu Wanru's entire arm was covered in wounds and was badly mutilated. The bathtub was filled with water, and her wrists were soaked in the water, causing pools of blood to ripple in the water. She still did not know the pain, and continued to stab herself. Her entire body was in a numb state, as if she could no longer feel pain. It was almost masochistic. It was not purely to scare people, but to really cut with force. Blood flowed out and dyed the snow-white hospital gown red. From afar, it looked like he had been fished out from a blood pool. "What are you doing?" Alarmed, Mu Lianjue walked over and questioned her harshly. Previously, when Mu Wanru woke up, her condition was not very good. When she found out that her child was lost, he could tell that her mental state was a little abnormal, but he didn't take it to heart. And now he was hiding here to torture himself. Could it be that the loss of the child was such a heavy blow to her? Mu Lianjue rushed over and grabbed her hand to stop her. What are you doing? Mu Wanru froze and raised her head abruptly. The moment her empty eyes saw him, they were instantly tainted with a hint of viciousness and viciousness. It's you. Her sudden roar made him confused. What do you mean? Chapter 1236. Mu Lianjue had been in the military when he was young. Although he was getting on in years, he still had some experience in martial arts. He snatched the fruit knife from her hand and kicked it far away, easily subduing her. Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill yourself and bring me bad luck? Mu Lianjue roared and pushed her to the side. Mu Wanru's body swayed, and she staggered before falling on her back beside the toilet bowl. She looked up, and her gaze was as sharp as a poisonous arrow as it ruthlessly pierced him. Who else could it be if not you? It's all your fault. You killed my child. That's my own flesh and blood, and it's all your fault. Give him back to me. Give him back to me. Mu Wanru screamed at him at the top of her lungs. She got up from the floor like a madwoman and pounced on him again with bared fangs and brandished claws. He gave her a slap, but she did not seem to feel pain at all. Like a malicious spirit that had crawled out of hell, she pounced on him. You lunatic! Mu Lianjue gripped her hand tightly. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Mu Wanru, don't play the fool here. I won't fall for your tricks. You ruined all my plans, and I haven't settled the score with you yet. Why? Do you think that I won't do anything to you if you play the fool? He paused for a moment before saying coldly, Besides, am I the one who killed your child? No. You'd better get to the bottom of this. Who is the one who killed your child? Mu Wanru smiled sinisterly like a vengeful spirit. Who else could it be if not you? If not you, who else could it be? Have you forgotten? His face was sullen. It's Muichen. If he didn't shoot you, you wouldn't have been able to save your child. To be precise, it's Muichen who killed your child. Do you understand? Muichen, it's him, it's Muichen. Mu Wanru stared blankly and muttered like a madwoman. Muichen, it's him who killed my child, it's him. She suddenly grabbed her hair with a ferocious expression and pulled it hard. It's him. He killed my child. Ha ha ha. I want him to pay with his life. I want him to pay with his life. The medical team rushed over. As soon as the nurse went up to her, Mu Wanru scratched her with her hand. Unexpectedly, she scratched the nurse's face. Don't come over. Don't touch me. You all want to harm me, don't you? Scram. Mu Wanru shouted. She looked like she had lost her mind, as if she had gone crazy. Everyone looked at each other. They knew that Mu Wanru must have suffered a huge blow from losing her child, which caused her to fall into a deranged state. They had to stabilize the patient's emotions first before proceeding with further treatment. When the nurse brought over a stun baton, everyone pounced on her and held her by the shoulders to control her. Mu Wanru was still struggling, her hands flailing wildly. A doctor walked over and took out the stun baton. She shuddered violently and convulsed all over before collapsing to the ground. Before she fainted, she still gritted her teeth and muttered, Muichen, it's you, it's you, it's you. Mu Wanru was then transferred to the emergency room for rescue. After this farce, Mu Lianjue only felt unlucky. He cursed and ordered, Watch her carefully. With that he left. Chapter 1237. At dawn the sun rose from the east. In the rainforest, the dew was heavy, and the cold moisture invaded his body. Yu felt that his joints were stiff and cold. From time to time, the howls of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. Muichen held a dagger in one hand and a torch in the other. He walked in front to explore the path and cut off the vines that obstructed their path. Lisa walked at the back and looked around vigilantly from time to time. Muichen muttered, How much longer until we can leave this place? It's not far. Yu felt a little weak. He was so tired that he felt like he was going to collapse at any time. He had not rested well for 2 days and 2 nights. He had overdrawn his strength for a long time and had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and night. He was hungry and cold. His physical condition had hit rock bottom. Muichen comforted him. Soon we can leave this place soon. Yu suddenly stopped in his tracks. His breathing was a little rapid. Lisa walked forward and carried him on her back without a word. Yu was stubborn and stubborn. He was reluctant at first, but now that he was exhausted, he did not have any strength left to struggle. He did not struggle too much, and simply let her carry him. "Thank you." He lowered his voice and said awkwardly. Lisa said expressionlessly, "You're my master." In other words, it was her responsibility to protect him. It was also her job. Yu pursed his lips. This girl was really stubborn. She was like a cold machine that meticulously followed the program's settings and did not know fatigue. Did she not feel tired? The three of them shuttled through the forest. Although Lisa carried Yu on her back, she was physically strong. She was wearing a combat uniform that was filled with lead. She was much heavier than Yu and Xiao Yichen combined. Therefore, she did not feel tired. On the other hand, Xiao Yichen's footsteps gradually slowed down, perhaps because he was injured. At this moment, there was a sudden rustling sound coming from the forest ahead. Mu Yichen was startled and somewhat frightened by the sound. Just as he was about to step forward to investigate, Lisa suddenly stopped him and shushed him, indicating that he should not act rashly. In the silence, in the dark forest, two pairs of yellow and sharp eyes suddenly flashed slightly in the dense bushes. Then, two creatures that looked similar to wolves and dogs slowly walked out from the dense forest. Two pairs of sharp eyes stared at them like tigers eyeing their prey. "What is this?" Mu Yichen could not help but feel suffocated. Lisa narrowed her eyes. After examining the two creatures in front of her, she suddenly said, "Wolves." "Wolf." Mu Yichen was secretly frightened. They seemed to have encountered a situation that they did not want to happen. Yu also frowned and sized them up. However, he said, "No, they are something fiercer than wolves." He had read about them in the animal encyclopedia before. They were definitely not wolves. Lisa frowned slightly. When she heard this, she could not help but take a small step back. Yu added in a deep voice behind her, "These are two jackals." Jackals? There was an idiom called jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards. Thus, it was obvious that jackals and wolves were ferocious. Usually, they hunted in pairs, which was very rare among wild beasts. In fact, there were always some people who confused jackals and wolves. In fact, jackals and wolves were not wolves. They were much smaller than wolves. Chapter 1238. They usually hunted in groups and were very alert. Their sense of smell was especially developed, and they were most active in the morning and evening. Jackals and wolves were very ferocious, and they liked to chase. After discovering their prey, they would gather together to hunt. In ancient times, there was a legend that said jackals were the nemesis of tigers. An individual jackal's attack power was slightly lower than a wolf's, but a pack of jackals was more tenacious than a pack of wolves. Different packs of jackals would cooperate to attack tigers and leopards. There were no racial differences, which greatly increased the survival ability of jackals. Two jackals walked out of the bushes side by side. A pair of gloomy eyes stared at the three intruders standing in front of them who had invaded their territory. From time to time, they would bare their teeth and let out eerie and terrifying howls. Lisa and Mu Yichen didn't move. Jackals loved to chase their prey. They especially liked to gather their companions to surround their prey, and then eat them. When she was on a mission in the past, Lisa had also been surrounded by jackals. But at that time she was different. She was fully armed. Even if she was in a pack of jackals, she could easily kill her way out with a rocket launcher. But now it was different. She had already run out of ammunition. Wait. Lisa suddenly remembered that there were still 2 bullets in the pistol. She looked at the 2 jackals in front of her vigilantly. Her hand slowly reached to her waist, grabbed the pistol, and pulled it out. "Retreat." She lowered her voice and ordered. Mu Yichen glanced at her. He carefully looked at the 2 jackals that were full of aggression and slowly retreated. Woo! The wolf let out a warning whimper and suddenly raised its neck. The wolf's howl echoed in the empty mountain forest, as if it was summoning the pack and calling for companions. Lisa suddenly pulled out her gun and shot. The bullet hit the head of one of the jackals. Blood splattered. It was a headshot in an instant. It was terrifyingly accurate. Without waiting for the other jackal to react, Lisa suddenly reloaded and shot at the other jackal's head. Bang! However, jackals were famous for their agility. The moment the bullet left the chamber, it reacted quickly. Poof! The bullet missed by a few millimeters and hit its chest. It howled and fell to the ground. Its limbs twitched violently as it kept struggling. Muyi-chen immediately went forward and almost didn't give it any chance to struggle. He grabbed its head with one hand and broke its head. The jackal let out a whimper and quickly stopped breathing. It was dead. Yu Yu's heart calmed down, but he felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness. He still remembered the introduction to jackals in the encyclopedia. Jackals and wolves were social animals. Most of them were strong and cunning leaders, who led one or several families to gather temporarily. This meant that there were more than 2 jackals and wolves in this area. Next, his guess was quickly confirmed. Muyi-chen stood up and suddenly heard a rustling sound not far away. He turned his head abruptly and looked over, only to see several pairs of yellow eyes flickering in and out of the bushes. It was a pack of jackals. Oh no! Yu Yu had a bad feeling and his heart trembled. Muyi-chen slowly retreated and stayed close to Lisa. He frowned vigilantly. According to his estimation, there were about a dozen jackals surrounding them. Chapter 1239. In the darkness, the fire from the torches dazzled their eyes. The strong light created a huge visual barrier for them and scared the wolves back a little. Taking advantage of their short and sluggish reaction, Muyi-chen growled, "Run!" Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back and turned to run with Muyi-chen. The wolves caught up with them very quickly. Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back, but still ran very fast. In her fear, all her potential was stimulated and her movements were as swift as an agile leopard. Muyi-chen didn't show any signs of weakness and ran very fast. In his panic, he accidentally tripped on the broken branches on the ground and fell to his knees. Lisa heard the commotion and turned her head around. She saw a jackal pouncing towards Muyi-chen with its fangs bared and claws brandished. She took a step forward and swung her fist at its head. Oh! The jackal was sent flying by the punch and rolled a few times on the ground. It stood up abruptly with a flash of fear in its eyes. Following that, it glared at Lisa and panted. Its greedy saliva dripped down its sharp fangs. It knew how dangerous Lisa was and didn't dare to act rashly. It panted heavily and tried to take a step forward from time to time, sharpening its knife. Muyi-chen was shocked and stood up abruptly. He saw that Lisa's knuckles were dripping with blood. Just now, in a moment of desperation, she didn't think much and swung her fist over. She hit the jackal's head, but her fist met its teeth. Her skin and flesh immediately split open. "Are you okay?" Muyi-chen looked guilty. Lisa didn't say anything and held Yu Yu with one hand and Muyi-chen's hand with the other. She turned around and ran. Behind him, the jackals and wolves continued to eye him covetously. As Muyi-chen ran, he swept the torch in his hand at them in an attempt to intimidate them. However, he was wrong about one thing. Wild beasts were afraid of fire, but the fire they were afraid of was the kind that spread over a large area and spread quickly. The torches in people's hands did not have much of an effect on them. If the animals are determined to attack you, the torch itself is useless. Sometimes the animals feel threatened and take measures to fight back. For example, if you hold a torch at night, you are more likely to be attacked by poisonous snakes in the grass. Therefore, the jackals were not afraid of the torch in his hand. Or perhaps, they were really hungry and had a strong desire to attack. Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at Lisa's hand. It was covered in blood. He could not help but frown. Lisa ran as fast as she could, but no matter how fast she couldn't match the speed of the jackals. A jackal pounced on her and pushed her to the ground. Yu Yu was thrown to the side. Muyi-chen hurriedly reached out and grabbed his hand. However, in the next second, Yu Yu felt the ground under his feet sink in. It was a trap. He shouted in his heart, but it was too late. His whole body fell down. Muyi-chen held his arm tightly, but he couldn't withstand the weight of his falling body. The two of them rolled down the hole together. Lisa was shocked when she saw this. The jackal that pounced on her pressed down on her shoulders with its paws. Its stinky breath assaulted her nostrils, and its saliva dripped onto her face. Its pair of eyes stared at her fiercely. Chapter 1240. She gripped its neck tightly, grabbed its upper and lower jaws, and twisted it with all her might. The jackal howled in pain and struggled to get away from her. Lisa stood up while panting heavily. She pulled out a machete from her waist belt and glanced warily at the pack of wolves that surrounded her. A jackal that was standing at the head of the pack suddenly pounced on her. She held the machete in her hand and swung it fiercely, piercing through its throat. Perhaps this scene was enough to intimidate the pack of wolves behind her. They were frightened by her violent actions and retreated a few steps. Their bloodshot eyes were filled with fear. Lisa walked over and choked the throat of the wolf that she had just pierced through. She raised the Malaysian saber in her hand high up and beheaded it with a single stroke. Then she kicked its head into the pack of wolves. The pack of wolves let out sorrowful and frightened howls. This jackal was their leader. Now that the pack of wolves had lost their leader, they naturally lost their will to fight. In the blink of an eye, they scattered like birds. Lisa walked to the entrance of the cave, picked up the flashlight, and shone it into the cave. It was dark and cold in the cave. Yu raised his head in a sorry state. He propped himself up with both arms and groped around. Then he heard a creaking sound and felt a sharp pain in his arm. His face instantly contorted in pain. He groaned a few times and struggled to pull his arm out. It was caught by a trap. The sharp teeth had bitten into his flesh. Fortunately, the trap was not big, so the wound was not very serious. Yu took a few deep breaths. His other hand groped around in the darkness and finally touched a cold arm. He quickly pushed aside the pile of withered grass and struggled to help Wuxia up. When Yu fell into the cave earlier, his feet stepped on the pit, so his body landed first. The ground of the cave was covered with a thick layer of grass. Therefore, other than a few bruises on his body, he was fine. The moment Wuxia fell into the cave, he instinctively grabbed Yu's arm. His head was facing down, and the moment he fell, his head hit the rock wall. Therefore, his consciousness was a little muddled. The flashlight shone down. Yu raised his head and saw Lisa asking, "How are you?" "I'm fine." He turned his head and gently patted Wuxia's cheek. Bro, how are you?" Wuxia slowly opened his eyes and hissed in pain. He rubbed the spot where he had been hit earlier, and felt a sticky trace of blood. His head was broken and blood was seeping out. Amid the pain, Wuxia sobered up a little. Yu said angrily, Yu, don't you know that this is dangerous?" "Yes. Idiot. Can't you?" Yu was exasperated. Wuxia was stunned, but he quickly understood the meaning of his words. Yu was angry. When he fell into the trap, Wuxia clearly had the chance to let go, but he grabbed his arm tightly and did not let go. Was he an idiot? Did he not know that he was in more danger than him? Wuxia did not think so much. It was almost an instinctive reaction. He only thought that no matter what happened, he had to protect his younger brother until the last moment. He could not leave him behind. Lisa looked down and asked, "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm a little hurt." Chapter 1241. Wuxia immediately took out the dagger tied to his thigh and poked it between his teeth. After much effort, Yu's arm was finally free. Lisa threw a bottle of medicine for emergencies. Wuxia immediately grabbed Yu's arm and applied the medicine to his wound. Yu couldn't stand the pain and couldn't help but groan a few times. His shoulders heaved up and down uncontrollably, and his scalp was numb. "It hurts a little. Bear with it." Wuxia didn't stop what he was doing. After the bleeding stopped completely, he pulled up the hem of his clothes, tilted his head, and used his mouth to pick up a corner. He tore off a piece of cloth and skillfully bandaged the wound. Yu bit the end of the cloth and tied a dead knot. Immediately he collapsed next to Lung Moli, panting heavily. Lisa stood at the entrance of the cave and observed for a while. It was a very new trap. It was probably set up not long ago. The hole wasn't deep, but it was about 5 or 6 meters deep. It would be difficult to climb out with bare hands. Lisa said, "Wait for me." With that, she turned and left. Yu leaned against the rock wall. His wound wasn't serious, but it was very cold in the cave. His blood coagulated, and his wound seemed to be frozen. It was excruciatingly painful. Yu's physical strength was almost exhausted. He sat in a daze and didn't have any strength left. Wuxia looked around. It was probably a trap used to catch animals. He sat down next to Yu and pulled up his sleeve, but it was already sticky with blood. When he fell on the ground, there was probably a broken arrow at the spot where he fell. At this moment, one end of the broken arrow was inserted into his arm. Along the way, He tried his best to endure the pain. It wasn't until he pulled up his sleeve that he realized that the wound was already bleeding profusely. He absent-mindedly recalled the soul-stirring scene just now, and his emotions were unable to calm down for a long time. If Lisa had not turned around and saved him, the wolf would have bitten his throat in the next second. Yu Yu was shocked when she saw the wound on his arm. What happened? It's nothing. It's just a small injury. He sat up with difficulty, held the dagger in his hand, and used the dagger to cut a hole in his clothes. He carefully tore his clothes and pulled them down to his shoulders. He examined the wound and looked at the half of the arrowhead that was still stuck in the wound. He bit his lip and used the knife to draw a cross on the wound. He grabbed the arrowhead and pulled it out forcefully. Blood spurted out. Muichen wiped off the blood on his face. Looking at the heart of the arrow, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He was worried that the arrowheads were poisoned. This forest was probably frequented by hunters. Many hunters would smear poison on their arrowheads to numb the nerves of wild animals. After hesitating for a moment, he gritted his teeth and kissed the wound. After a while, he turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He frowned and persistently kissed the wound again. Then he tore off the cloth on his body and quickly wrapped the wound firmly. When he raised his head, he suddenly met Yu Yu's shocked eyes. What's wrong? Yu Yu was stunned for a long time. It was not because of anything else, but because Muichen's skills were skillful and swift. Could it be that he often got injured like this? Stupid brother, do you often get injured? Muichen was stunned for a moment before he slowly nodded. Okay. Why? Chapter 1242. In the past, when I was in the special training camp, I often got injured when I was out in the wild. Yu Yu felt as if his heart had been stabbed. His heart ached for him. All right, don't let your imagination run wild. I'm used to it. Muichen chuckled and reached out to rub his hair. Yu Yu grabbed his hand unhappily. Promise me. You're not allowed to get injured again. Yu Yu stared into his eyes and said word by word. Muichen was stunned. He was a little surprised. Suddenly, he saw undisguised love in Yu Yu's eyes. His heart warmed. All right. I promise you. Okay. Yu Yu leaned back and sat against the jagged stone wall. His back was rubbed against the uneven stone wall. He adjusted the angle of his back and felt better. He was a little tired. He took the opportunity to rest and recuperate. When he closed his eyes, he suddenly heard the sound of someone getting up. He opened his eyes in surprise, only to see a large coat covering her head, blocking all of his vision. Yu Yu waved his hand in an attempt to pull it away, but a strong hand held him back. It's cold here. Don't catch a cold, Muichen said. Aren't you cold? I'm not cold, Muichen sneered. This is nothing. Really? Yu Yu was a little doubtful. Muichen pursed his lips. I'm really not cold. In the winter, I can swim a few times in the lake. But in reality, he was cold too. The cold in the cave was wet and cold. It was so cold that his scalp was numb. When he frowned, he felt that his scalp was almost frozen. After a while, Lisa found some vines and hung them down the stone wall. Climb up, she shouted from above. Muichen stood up. The other end of the rattan was tied tightly to the tree by Lisa. You go first, Muichen said to Yu Yu. Yu Yu shook her head tiredly. Go up first, then pull me up. Okay, wait for me. Muichen grabbed onto the vines with both hands and kicked off the stone wall with the tips of his feet. In no time at all, he climbed up. Turning around, he shouted into the cave. Yu Yu, hurry up and come up. However, he seemed to have forgotten that Yu Yu's hand was injured. Even if Yu Yu was not injured, he would not be able to climb up with his pathetic arm strength. Yu Yu tried for a while, enduring the pain of being cut by the vines, and fell down several times. I think I don't have any strength left. Yu Yu's weak voice was heard. You guys should meet up with the troops first, then think of a way to save me. Lisa frowned. Before she could say anything, Muichen said anxiously, No, I can't leave you here alone. It's safe here. I'll wait for you guys here. After a pause, Yu Yu said helplessly, I really don't have any strength left. I'm so tired. This place is too far from the entrance. I can't climb up at all. I'll go down and carry you. Are you crazy? If he carried him, he would have to bear double the weight. If it was before, he believed that Mui Chen could do it. However, Mui Chen was on the verge of exhaustion now. There was no way he could do it. Brother, don't worry. It's safe here. I'll wait here for you guys to save me. Yu Yu's voice was heard again. Mui Chen still could not bear to see him leave. Chapter 1243. Yu Yu continued. Based on my estimation, this place is not far from the rendezvous point. An hour's round trip should be enough. Don't worry, brother, I can hold on. Don't worry about me. Okay. You must wait for me. Yu Yu smiled and ordered. Lisa, protect my brother. Yes, master. Lisa replied respectfully. She also felt that if they continued to drag on, the three of them would be exhausted and none of them would be able to walk out of here. While the two of them still had energy, they should quickly rendezvous with the troops. It was relatively safer for Yu Yu to stay here. Lisa said, stay here and wait for me. Yu Yu nodded. Lisa turned around and continued on their way. Mui Chen was conflicted. However, it was indeed relatively safer for Yu Yu to stay here. His stamina was too weak. Mui Chen also knew that Lisa and he were on the verge of exhaustion. If they met with any accidents along the way, they would not be able to attend to them. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and looked at Yu Yu deeply before he turned around and followed them. Yu Yu closed his eyes and rested. At this moment, he was extremely exhausted. He knew his body's condition very well. It would be extremely difficult for him to stay here and wait for them, let alone follow them on their journey. However, no matter how slim the hope was, as long as he had a little bit of energy left, he would persevere until the very last moment. Yu Yu wrapped himself in the jacket that Mui Chen had left for him. The cave was cold and damp, and it was almost overwhelming. He felt that all the blood in his body seemed to have solidified, so much so that it was difficult for it to flow. Every blood capillary on his cheeks was frozen, and even the slightest change in expression made his face feel numb. He touched his face and thought that there was a layer of ice on his face. Yu Yu tried her best to keep her eyes open. She was tired and sleepy. When she was freezing, she couldn't help but curl up into a ball like a fragile shrimp in a corner. However, she couldn't resist the cold. Gradually, his eyelids became heavier and heavier. He tried his best to keep his eyes wide open, knowing that his physical strength had reached its limit. However, he could not allow himself to close his eyes. The temperature in the forest was almost 0 degrees Celsius, especially at dawn, when the chill was heavy. He raised his head and looked at the sun rising from the east, but he did not feel the slightest bit of light or heat. He sighed inwardly and felt that he couldn't go on like this. At the very least, he had to stand up and move his body. Otherwise, he would be frozen stiff and feel dizzy. It was as if he would fall unconscious in the next second. In such an environment, if he closed his eyes, he didn't know if he could wake up. Yu Yu stood up and hugged his jacket tighter. He stomped his feet on the spot and walked around the cave. The strong wind blew into the cave entrance. Due to the special structure of the trap, the wind in the cave was especially strong. It blew in like ice water pouring over one's head. Yu Yu gave up. After careful consideration, he decided to find a place where he could shelter himself from the wind for the time being. He found a corner and sat down. He raised his head and looked at the sky in a daze. At this moment, the sky was already slightly bright. Where were Xiao Yichen and Lisa now? Chapter 1244. His back was leaning against the rock wall, which was craggy and jagged. When he fell, his back had hit the sharpest part of the rock. He reckoned that it was because he had lost some weight. His back was stained with dew, and it was painful and itchy. It was as if countless ants were gnawing on his wound. He had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and a night. His throat was almost smoking from coughing. All the bad things had come together to form a hopeless situation. Yu Yu buried his face in his arms, full of hope. When he opened his eyes and looked up again, Xiao Yichen had already reached out to him from inside the cave. After passing through a large forest, there was a road that was several kilometers long. Xiao Yichen and Lisa ran and stopped on the road one after another. They tried their best to establish contact with the troops in the shortest time possible. At this time, the sun was slowly rising from the horizon. Although it was early in the morning, the temperature could not reach them, but it still drove away some of the coldness and brought about a rare warmth. Xiao Yichen's footsteps became heavier and heavier. He was in a state of overload and could collapse at any moment. His condition was worse than Yin Tianyou's. He was covered in injuries. Some of them were not treated in time, and were already inflamed, causing excruciating pain. Even so, he didn't slow down at all. That was because Yu Yu was still waiting for him. A minute later meant a minute more danger. Lisa looked at his stiff and forbearing expression, and knew that he was enduring the pain on his body. "I'll carry you," she said. Muichen looked at her in surprise, but he quickly hid the surprise in his eyes and coldly said, "No." She had always respected the strong. In her eyes, Muichen's willpower was shockingly strong, so her impression of him changed somewhat. Muichen's throat was extremely dry. Suddenly, his legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Lisa immediately walked over and reached out to help him. Muichen did not reach out his hand though. His shoulders were heaving violently, and his breathing was rapid. Despite his efforts to restrain himself, his whole body was strangely stiff. Muichen gritted his teeth and slowly stretched his body. He took a deep breath of cold air, and tried to push himself up from the ground with his hand on the wall. However, when he half knelt on one knee and propped his upper body up, his vision turned black. He felt dizzy and his back was instantly covered in cold sweat. Lisa reached out to touch his forehead and was shocked to find that he had a fever. Beads of cold sweat the size of beans on his forehead and flowed down. Muichen opened his eyes. His face was ghastly pale without a trace of blood. Lisa knelt on one knee on the ground and gently wiped away the cold sweat on his face. She had already guessed that the wounds on his body must have been infected. Coupled with the exhaustion of his physical strength throughout the night, this led to the fever. However, she didn't have any more medicine on her. "Is it serious?" She knitted her brows and asked with concern. Yu Yu had already told her to protect him, so at this moment, it was her duty to protect him. Muichen bit his lips and shook his head. "It's fine." As he spoke, another bean-sized bead of cold sweat rolled down his face. No matter how strong he was, his body could not deceive her eyes. Chapter 1245. When he opened his eyes again, Muichen felt that the dizziness had subsided a little. He thought that his physical strength had reached its limit. He became more anxious. There was a deep sense of helplessness. How good would it be if he was a Superman? However, he was not. At that moment, he was extremely frustrated with himself for being powerless. He could not even protect his younger brother. He was so angry at himself that he could not help but punch the ground. His knuckles were bleeding. "What are you doing?" Lisa held his fist tightly. This idiot. Did he think that his injuries were not serious enough? Muichen reached out to wipe the cold sweat off his face. He struggled to stand up. His body swayed, and his vision turned black again. His body fell forward heavily. Lisa immediately went forward and supported his center of gravity. As soon as she touched his skin, she felt a chill that seeped into her heart. The temperature of his skin was frighteningly cold. It was as if it could penetrate her clothes and freeze her blood. His clothes were all wet. Some of it was blood, while others were wet from the dew as they passed through the forest. Along the way, he had been trying to be brave. He endured his exhaustion and forced himself to walk so far. At that moment, he no longer had any energy left. Despite his physical condition, he still insisted on carrying Yu Yu. His willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. Lisa carried him on her back. Muichen was half a head taller than Yu Yu. Hence, he was heavier than Yu Yu. Lisa did not have much energy left. If it was in her usual state, Muichen's weight was nothing. However, at that moment, her body swayed and she almost collapsed. Muichen's head rested weakly on her shoulder. His rapid breathing blew into her ears. She could still feel his strong and rapid heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was scorching hot. She supported him with all her strength and stepped on the road again. On the mountain road, the wind was biting cold. She was drenched in sweat, and when the wind blew, she felt both wet and cold. Muichen's mind was in a mess. When he opened his eyes in a daze, he felt that he was being carried on someone's back. He looked down and saw Lisa's determined face. The cold wind brushed past her hair. Her messy hair intertwined with her thick and long eyelashes. Observing the side of her face from a close distance, he discovered that this girl had a face that could make people think she was a celestial being. She had a special temperament. She clearly looked so cold and arrogant, as if there was not a trace of smoke or fire on her body. The blood flowing in her body had long condensed into snow, and her bones had been cast into ice. However, one could not help but feel sorry for her. She clearly looked very unapproachable, distant, cold, and unapproachable. However, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness. After a long night of trekking, Lisa gradually felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She was not really a war machine. She was made of flesh and blood. Even living people had their limits. Hence, she could not help but slow down. Mui Chen said weakly, Put me down. I can walk on my own. Shut up. Be quiet." Lisa spat out a few words with difficulty. She was already distraught. Her legs were as heavy as lead. It was so heavy that she found it difficult to lift a step. Chapter 1246. His head felt heavy and muddled, and the scene in front of him started to drift away. Finally, she could not bear the burden anymore. Her world suddenly turned dark. Just as she was about to collapse, she vaguely saw a troop rushing toward her from the edge of her blurry vision. Lisa squinted her eyes slightly and shook her head hard, trying to get rid of the confusion in her head. Only then did she get a clearer view. Leading the way was Vermilion Bird, who was fully armed. Walking beside her was Njia. As if a stream of energy had been injected into her body, she pulled herself together and walked toward Vermilion Bird with Muichen on her back. Vermilion Bird saw a girl carrying a child toward her at the end of the mountain road. Squinting her eyes and recognizing that the child was Lisa, she raised her hand. "It's Lisa. Luca, send someone to get her." "Yes." Luca immediately led his team and rushed over. Lisa tried her best to hold on until the last moment when Luca reached her. When his teammate picked up Xiaoyi Chen, her body swayed and she collapsed to the ground. "Lisa." Luca squatted down in shock and carried Lisa. "Oh." She opened her mouth and her eyelids fluttered a few times. Before she could say a word, she fainted. She had been holding on for so long. She was beyond her limit. Luca anxiously called out a few times. Lisa was already unconscious. When Vermilion Bird arrived, she only saw two people. "Where's Yun Tianyu?" Luca shook his head in silence. There were only two children and one child missing. She frowned and put on her headset. "Command Center, this is Vermilion Bird. Please send Yin Tianyu's location." "Yes." The temporary command center immediately sent the location information to her laptop. In fact, she had originally planned to meet at the bridge, but when the person did not show up, she requested the command center to send Yin Tianyu's location. In the end, the reply she got was that the location signal was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. There was no signal coverage in the forest, so the location was not accurate. After Zhu Ke lost contact with Lisa, she sent people into the forest to search for her. Yin Tianyu's signal frequency, however, was abnormal. By the time he arrived, his signal was already several miles away. This meant that he was heading north. Therefore, the Vermilion Bird sent people to the rendezvous point, not leaving even an inch. In the end, this was the result that he had been waiting for. When Vermilion Bird's troops arrived at the last location, they found a trap that was more than 5 meters deep. When she turned on the flashlight and shone it inside, there was no one. She only found a blood-stained coat. The centaur fished out the coat. Vermilion Bird looked at it, her face slightly sullen. "What's going on?" Gong Jie's voice came from the headset. "Where is Yin Tianyu?" Vermilion Bird buckled her headset and replied, "He's gone. Please send the location again. The location signal has been cut off." Interrupted? Vermilion Bird was slightly surprised. "How is that possible?" Luca said in a low voice. "The chip implanted in his body is made of material that can be absorbed by the human body. If the time limit is exceeded, the chip will be absorbed by the human body." Vermilion Bird frowned and clenched her fists tightly. She turned around and coldly ordered, "Send more people to search for him. He's not far from here. Do a carpet search." "Yes." Chapter 1247. In the hospital, Mu Yaja received a call from Li Hanlin. According to his report, Mui Chen had returned safely. Yin Tianyu's whereabouts were unknown, so they had sent more people to search for him. Mu Yaja was shocked. "What happened?" Because we have lost contact with the two children, we don't know what exactly happened. We'll know the details when the little master wakes up. Chairman Mu, I'm sorry. Mu Yaja hung up the phone and turned to meet Yun Shishir's expectant and inquiring gaze. Are the children back? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded and furrowed his brows. He decided to hide this matter from her for the time being. They're back safely, don't worry. They're back? Where are they? Yun Shishir's face finally regained its color. Her eyes lit up as she excitedly tried to get off the bed. Mu Yaja stopped her. I'll bring you there when you're feeling better. No. Yun Shishir's face froze for a moment before she asked suspiciously. Mu Yaja, are you lying to me just to comfort me? Actually, the children aren't back safely, right? She was a little suspicious and stared at him suspiciously. Mu Yaja said, Be good. I'm not lying to you. The two children were injured and were sent to the hospital. If you want to see them, look at how haggard you are now. My heart will ache if they see you like this. Yun Shishir was startled. She lowered her head to take a look. Indeed, she looked a little haggard now. Have some porridge first and rest for a while. I'll bring you there when you look better, okay? Mu Yaja gently coaxed her. Yun Shishir looked at him suspiciously for a while. She did not see any trace of deceit on his face before she returned to bed unhappily. I don't feel at ease until I see the children. Have some porridge first, okay? Mu Yaja picked up the bowl of porridge at the side and looked at her tenderly. Ever since he rushed back to the country, he had been accompanying her for 2 days and 2 nights without sleep. As a result, there was some stubble on his chin. His originally handsome face had become thinner and more chiseled. Yun Shishir looked at him deeply and suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She suddenly felt that she was a little too willful. She could not sleep well due to worry. He too could not close his eyes. She was a mother, and he was also a father. How could he not be worried? She was worried and scared, but she could rely on him. As for him, but she had no one to talk to. He must be more tired. Tears welled up in her eyes all of a sudden. Mu Yaja opened the thermos flask and picked up the porridge. When he turned to look at her, he saw her guilty expression and frowned slightly. What's wrong? Mu Yaja. I've made you worry. Yun Shishir muttered weakly. She looked up and stared at him. From now on, I'll listen to you and not let my thoughts run wild. Mu Yaja was slightly stunned. He could not help but reach out his finger and gently scratch her nose. Silly. He picked up the spoon and said gently, I'll feed you, okay? Okay. Yun Shishir nodded. The porridge was sent over by the servant earlier. It was in the thermos flask and was still a little hot. Chapter 1248. Yun Shishir took a small bite and swallowed it. Instantly, she felt warm all over her body. Her body did not feel so cold anymore. Mu Yaja repeated the action until he fed her half a bowl of porridge. Yun Shishir said, I'm full. I can't drink anymore. Drink a little more, he coaxed patiently. She could not bear with him and drank a few more mouthfuls. She had a small appetite. After she was full, she lay down gently. Mu Yaja stood up and walked to the bathroom. After washing up, he walked to the bed. I'm going to the office to settle something. Have a good rest and wait for me to come back. You're going to the office? Yun Shishir was a little dissatisfied. Is there something important? Yes, it's very important. There were some debts that he had to settle with that person. Yun Shishir asked, When are you coming back? I'll come back when I'm done. Yun Shishir pouted. That was as good as not saying anything. However, she did not say anything. She lay down on the bed obediently and smiled. I'll wait for you. Okay. Mu Yaja folded the bedding for her and turned to leave. A wave of darkness that could topple mountains and overturn seas swept towards him. Immediately after, he fainted. In his groggy state, he felt an inexplicable heat. It was so hot that his whole body was burning. His chest felt as though it was being burned by something, and it was swollen and painful. Yu woke up from his muddled state. He was a little confused about where he was. The headache was getting clearer. The pain was clear and intense. Somehow, his weak consciousness told him that he was still alive. After a long period of darkness, when he opened his eyes again, it was because he felt a tender little hand running amok on his face. When he woke up, he opened his eyelids and saw a small, wheat-colored hand gently stroking his eyelashes. Wow. Appa, this little brother's eyelashes are so beautiful. They're so long, just like a beautiful fan. A tender and soft voice sounded. Yu Yu frowned slightly. She tried to open her eyelids, but her vision was still blurry. Ling Ling, little brother is injured. Move aside and don't disturb his rest. But father, Ling Ling didn't disturb little brother's rest. Father, why is little brother's skin so white? He looks like a child from the city. Also, little brother is very handsome. Even more handsome than that Huzi in the village. Yu Yu's heart tightened, and his eyes widened in an instant. He turned his head abruptly and met the eyes of a little girl, who was looking at him with surprise. The girl was startled at first, then she leaned over and cupped his face to take a look. Yu Yu's eyes widened in shock. Seeing that he had woken up, a look of joy appeared on the little girl's face. Father, little brother is awake. Little brother is awake. The little girl waved her hands happily and ran away. Yu Yu suddenly sat up on the bed. However, his movement was too big, and it affected the wound on his arm. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and gently covered his arm with his trembling hand. He turned his head and looked around. What entered his eyes was a slightly backward civilian hut. Chapter 1249. The floor was paved with green stone slabs. He was lying on a 4-poster wooden bed. Where was this place? He remembered that he had fallen into a trap. After he fainted, he didn't know what had happened. When he woke up, why was he in a villager's house? Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at himself. He had changed into a new set of clothes. He didn't know where the clothes came from, but they looked a little rustic. They had been washed too many times and were a size too big. His wounds had been cleaned in time, replaced with gauze, and bandaged properly. Not long after, along with the sound of hurried footsteps, an adult man led the noisy little girl to the bedside. Seeing that she had finally woken up, his face was filled with relief, but at the same time, a trace of guilt appeared. Little boy, you're awake. It's good that you're awake. It's good that you're awake. Yu Yu was instantly on guard as he sized up the man in front of him. The man was slightly older. He had dark skin and a sturdy physique. He was wearing the same clothes that had been washed too many times, and his beard was unshaven. It was obvious that he didn't take care of himself and looked a little sloppy. However, his face was calm and honest, and his entire body emitted a simple and unadorned aura. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was thick and hoarse. It seemed that he must be a veteran smoker. He sat by the bedside. Yu Yu sensed the deep kindness in his eyes, and let down his guard. It was probably this man who had rescued him from the trap. It was also this man who had helped him bandage his wounds and change his clothes. It seemed that this man didn't have any ill intentions. Hence, he didn't have to be wary of him. Who are you? Yu Yu smiled and asked. The man smiled, then hugged the little girl, and told him the story. When I went to retrieve the trap today, I found that you had fallen into it, so I rescued you. I saw that you were injured, so I brought you back first. I saw that you were covered in blood and were seriously injured. The man's calm and hoarse voice had a strong local accent. From his long-winded narration, Yun Tianyu learned that there was a remote farm near this mountain path. The man before him was a farmer living there. He usually farmed a dozen or so mu of land, and occasionally went hunting in the mountains. And the trap that he fell into was set up by him. He originally hoped to catch some wild wolves and deer, but he didn't expect that he would step on it and fall down. It was no wonder that when he woke up, this man walked over and showed such an ashamed expression to him. It was said that the farm here was called Anyang Village, a typical village in the city. Speaking of which, the villagers of Anyang Village could be considered as old natives of the capital. Because the place was remote, surrounded by mountains and rivers, far from the city center, the city government did not develop it. The main reason was that there wasn't much value in developing such a location. There were a few hundred villagers in Anyang Village. Most of them used to farm for a living. Although they weren't rich, they lived a peaceful life. A few years ago, a farmer had the whimsical idea of opening up a forest and planting fruit trees. Unexpectedly, the harvest that year was good, so the villagers of Anyang Village started planting fruit trees one after another. When this man brought him back, it was said that it caused a stir in the village. Chapter 1250. Secondly, When the man brought him back, he was covered in blood, which attracted the attention of many villagers. Some of them felt sorry for him, so they sent him some old clothes. Little boy, why did you go to that forest? It's dangerous there. There are a lot of wild animals there. Where are you from? How did you end up here? The man fired a barrage of questions at him like a machine gun. He looked young, but he did not look like a country bumpkin. His clothes were expensive, and his skin was fair and tender. He was a typical child who grew up in the city. His daughter was envious. Girls love to look good, but growing up in the countryside, his skin was tanned and rough. Seeing Yu's handsome face and fair skin, she was envious. While he was unconscious, she tirelessly leaned on the bed and sized him up. She would pick up his hand and look at it, and then she would fiddle with his eyelashes. She would never get tired of playing with them. The little girl yearned for life in the city. There were always idol dramas on TV. Her dream was to get into a city university when she grew up and live in the city. The little girl fell in love with Yin Tianyu at first sight. Although she was still young and had not reached the age of first awakening of love, she actually knew how to be shy when she looked at Yu. Yu felt that this family was quite warm-hearted and friendly to him. They were simple and honest, and did not seem to harbor any ill intentions toward him. Moreover, his wounds were cleaned, so he still had a good impression of the man in front of him. However, when the man asked about his identity, he did not say much and only said that he lived in the city. The man asked for his parents' numbers so that he could call them and send him home. Yu gave him Li Hanlin's number. The man then left the little girl at home to look after him while he went to the village to make a call. This village was very remote, so the communication system was very outdated. Not every family had such an advanced and luxurious thing like a mobile phone, nor did they have a landline. Many people would go to a small store in the village to make a call. There was a public phone there, and it was called E-Department's PHS. 1 yuan could make a call for a few minutes. It was quite worth it. When the villagers of Anyang village needed to make a call, they would go to the convenience store to make the call. Anyang village was very far away from the nearby villages and towns. Fortunately, living in this village, they did not have to worry about food and clothing. Therefore, the villagers here rarely left the village. The little girl's name was Lingling, and her full name was Zhao Linghua. She was 6 years old this year, and was attending a private primary school in the village. That was what Lingling had told him. Seeing that Yu had woken up, Lingling immediately started chattering nonstop. Yu didn't have the energy to respond to her. He just leaned on the bed quietly and waited for the man to finish the call. After contacting Li Hanlin, he waited for Li Hanlin to come and pick him up. Yu's indifference did not dampen the little girl's enthusiasm. She talked to herself and did not feel lonely. Instead, she was very happy. This was understandable. Lingling had grown up in this village, and it was rare for her to see a child from the city. Naturally, she was filled with curiosity. Little brother, is the moon in the city big and round? Chapter 1251. I saw on TV that there are many tall buildings in the city. They're very, very tall. They're so tall. Won't the wind blow them down? Where's your house, big brother? Do you have immortal taro pancakes at home? My mother knows how to make immortal taro pancakes. They're delicious. They're made with taro. They're sweet and crunchy. She became more and more excited as she spoke. She jumped off the bed and ran out of the door. No one knew what she was going to do. Not long after, she skipped into the room with a plate in her hands. There were a few golden taro pancakes on the plate. She handed the plate to him, raised her thick eyebrows slightly, and said with a smile, "These are my mother's immortal taro pancakes. They're very delicious. They're freshly made. Do you want to try them?" As she spoke, she took a piece and put it in her mouth. She took a big bite and began to chew. It was crunchy. Looking at her eating, it tasted exceptionally good. Yu hesitated for a moment, but he was simply too hungry. He had not eaten or drunk anything for 2 days, so his stomach was rumbling with hunger. Hence, he could not care less as he picked up a piece and bit into it. Hiss! It was so sweet. It was so sweet that it stuck to his teeth. Yu bit off a piece and chewed. Lingling was elated when she saw that he had eaten it. She asked proudly, "Is it good? Is it good?" "Yes." Yu nodded politely. Although it was not his favorite flavor, he felt that it was quite tasty now that he was hungry. Lingling sat by his bed and ate a piece of taro pancake each. She chattered incessantly as she nibbled on the immortal taro pancake. Yu would respond politely from time to time. Do you watch TV? We have a TV at home. My father bought it in town last year. Lingling got off the bed and turned on the TV. Yu's lips twitched when he saw it. She must have bought this second-hand TV, right? It was black and white and only about 10 inches long. When she turned it on, snowflakes fluttered in the air. This type of TV had been phased out more than 10 years ago. However, in Anyang village, it was already considered very fashionable to have such a television. There were only a few channels on the TV. At this moment, there was only the afternoon news, but Lingling was also watching it with relish. For her, as long as there were people moving in the screen, she would find it very interesting. Not long after, the man hurried back, but he brought some bad news. As it turned out, when he rushed over, the store was actually closed. After asking around, it turned out that the store owner had gone to town to stock up on goods. Now it was a distance of 30 miles to town. Adding on the fact that he had to stock up on goods, he would probably only be back tomorrow. Therefore, the man said that he would settle him down for the night first. When the boss of the snack bar came back tomorrow, he would call his family. Although Yu was worried, there was nothing she could do. Then I'll have to trouble you. Yu thanked him politely. The man blushed in embarrassment. Sigh. Don't say that, I'm embarrassed. Little brother, it's good that you can forgive me. If I hadn't dug that trap, you wouldn't have fallen into it. It turned out that the man was still feeling guilty about that. Yu comforted him. It's fine. It was fine as long as he was fine. Chapter 1252. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Yu felt cold sweat in his heart. It turned out that this man was still feeling guilty about this matter. When Lingling heard that Yu was going to stay tonight, she was so happy that she jumped 3 feet high. Hey, Daddy is so awesome. So awesome. I'm so happy that Big Brother is staying at our house tonight. She was overjoyed, and a smile bloomed on her face. Children always lacked playmates, and for a child of her age, having one more playmate was the greatest joy. Moreover, in Lingling's eyes, Yu was beautiful with fair skin and big eyes. Hence she especially liked this handsome big brother. Yu frowned slightly and ignored Lingling. He asked, so in such a big village, only the convenience store has a phone that can contact the outside world? That's right. Little brother, I'm not going to lie to you. In our village, the traffic signal is rather backward. There's a big mountain outside and a big forest in the middle. That area is under the control of the government. Plus, our village is neither big nor small. It's vast but sparsely populated. There are only a few hundred villagers in total. That's why the signal tower couldn't be built. As for the phone in the convenience store, it's quite fashionable in our village. Even so, the signal is intermittent. The man laughed awkwardly. His face was red, and he looked a little embarrassed. Although Yu was disappointed, he didn't complain. After all, this man was so nice to him. Besides, staying for one night was nothing. Hence he nodded and said, Okay, I'll wait and see tomorrow. The man nodded and explained carefully, but I'm afraid that your parents will be worried about you. I'm also very anxious. But there's no other way. The village is not like the city. All the facilities are backward. It's okay. But I'll have to trouble you today. Yu smiled and thanked him gracefully. The man was a little flattered. He rubbed his hands together and looked a little nervous. He suddenly laughed dryly and asked, Are you hungry? No, I just ate a few pieces of taro cake. Oh, do you want a few more? The man was so enthusiastic that Yu couldn't handle it. Oh, do you want some water? Okay, thank you, uncle. Yu was famous for being a sweet talker. When the man heard that, he was overjoyed. Yu was not like those children in the village who were used to being wild since they were young. But he was only 7 years old. Yu was very polite. Yu's heart was sweeter than honey. From their conversation, Yu learned that the man's name was Zhao Xiangjuan, and that he was an ordinary villager in the village. He owned a few acres of land behind his house, and planted a few acres of wheat and vegetables. He knew how to hunt, so whenever he was free, he would hunt for game in the mountains. Occasionally, when he was lucky, he would hunt a few deer and sell their skins at the market. Usually, he would be able to fetch a good price and not have to worry about his monthly expenses. Yu's days were peaceful and comfortable. Zhao Xiangjuan's wife Li Ru was a typical farmer's wife. Her skin was dark and rough, and her voice was a little loud. However, she was warm and friendly. It was afternoon now. The sun outside was gradually getting hotter. Chapter 1253. Lingling pulled him along and proudly introduced Yu to a few of her friends in the village. They were all young children. The oldest was 12 years old, and the youngest was 7 years old. They were all immature brats. Yu, who was secretly criticizing these children in his heart, did not realize that in the eyes of others, he was also a brat who was still wet behind the ears. When the group of children saw that a new friend had arrived, they surrounded Yu and sized him up. Lingling, who is this guy? My father brought him back. I heard that he came from the city. From the city? Hearing these words, all the children's eyes shone brightly. They crowded in front of Yu and asked him curiously. The children in the city are just like what they show on TV. Their skin is white and tender. Hey, what's your name? The child who spoke was called Ergo. His name is Yu. You can call him Yu. Zhao Linghua introduced him enthusiastically. Yu. Wow. That's a nice name. It sounds so Western. It's not as old-fashioned as my name. Yu, you're so good-looking. You look like a white porcelain doll. I heard from my father that the children in the city are all little princesses and young masters. Yu, are you a young master too? Yu's lips twitched for a while. Zhao Linghua gently tugged at Yu's sleeve. Because she was shy, her face was red. She lowered her head slightly and said expectantly, Little brother, do you want to play with us? Lingling. Li Ru pretended to be angry and said, Little brother is injured. How can he play with you? Don't mess around. Also, have you finished the homework that the teacher gave you? You only know how to play and don't do your homework. How are you going to get into the city's schools when you grow up? Ling made a face. Mom, I finished my homework. That's why I came out to play. She stuck out her tongue and turned around. Then she grabbed Yu's hand and ran out of the house. Li Ru stomped her feet in anger. In front of the door, there was a large open space. On the ground, there was a crooked drawing of a lattice with chalk. A little boy in dirty clothes was half squatting on the ground, fiddling with a small piece of tile. His pair of clear black and white eyes were fully focused in front of him. Lingling introduced the little boy as her older brother, Zhao Tianyu. The little guy was very young, no more than 7 years old, but his appearance was very delicate. His pair of phoenix eyes were especially beautiful, his white and flawless skin, and his delicate facial features were completely different from the appearance of the Zhao couple. At that time, the gossip in the village said that the Zhao couple could not have children, and this child was adopted by the Zhao couple at a high price. Usually they worshipped him like a little ancestor. In the village, there was a saying that raising a child would help one prepare for one's old age. It was also said that there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no children was the worst. Therefore, the couple insisted on having a boy. Their family was also well off, so under the doting, the little guy's food and clothing were considered good among the children in the village. Later on, Zhao Linghua was born. His name was Zhao Tianyu, and his nickname was Daodu. He grew up wearing the same pants as Zhao Linghua and always played behind her. His favorite game was hopscotch. Chapter 1254. Therefore, he was not interested in the game at all. He sat at the door like an old man. The boy in front of her was full of childish nature. Even though he could not run steadily, he was very playful. He pulled Zhao Linghua and cried, pestering her to play with him. Lingling, I'll jump first. Watch me. This time, I won't go back on my word. Lil P smiled at her, revealing a row of white teeth. Lingling said a number weakly. 8. Lil P made a sound of agreement, and threw the ball with all her might. She then jumped around excitedly in the grid. Yu sat at the door, resting his chin on one hand as he lazily basked in the sun. Lingling kept asking him to play with her, but Yu was not very interested in this. His indifference made Lingling feel a little disappointed, so she played with Lil P listlessly. Not long after, the other children came running over one after another. the group of children started to make a ruckus. It was the sound of children arguing, quarreling, and laughing. It sounded carefree, clear, and loud. It was like a free bird, chirping nonstop, as if it didn't know exhaustion. Yu looked at the children who were making a ruckus and suddenly sighed. What a group of energetic children! Not long after, the Zhao family's door was filled with people. It turned out that the villagers had come over out of curiosity to see what was going on. They had heard that Zhao Xiangjuan had come back from hunting in the mountains and rescued a child. When he brought the child back, he was covered in blood, scaring everyone. They did not know where the child came from, and why he ran into the mountains for no reason. The mountains were so big, so they thought that the child's parents were heartless and abandoned the child. Speaking of which, among the villagers of Anyang village, many of the parents in the city were too heartless. There were a few times when human traffickers brought children from the city and lied to the honest and kind villagers that the children were abandoned by the people in the city. Most of the villagers were kind, and some of them did not have children, so they spent a lot of money to adopt the children. But in reality, they were all trafficked by human traffickers. It was just that these villagers rarely interacted with the outside world, and were all natives. Therefore, word spread like wildfire. The villagers' impression of the people in the city was that they were rich and respectable. There was also no lack of heartless parents who didn't even want their own children, and casually threw them away. Therefore, some people thought that Yu's parents abandoned her, so they asked, Yu, do your parents abandon you? Is that why he threw you up the mountain? No, Yu answered honestly but did not say anything else. But when those people saw that it was a child, they teased him and pretended to be serious as they said, You have been deceived. My parents definitely don't want you anymore. That's why I lost you. Do you want to come to my house and be my son? Yu's face instantly darkened. She said word by word, No. The woman's face stiffened. In fact, she really thought that Yu had been abandoned by a heartless couple in the city. Didn't she hear that the city was implementing family planning? So, she thought that they abandoned her and threw her into the mountains. Looking at Yu's handsome face, she was tempted.